19th, welcome to the SAU55 Withdrawal Planning Committee meeting. Mrs. Belcher, could you take roll call, please?
Sabrina Alberg, Kim Farah.
Here.
John Hughes.
Here.
Barbara Kiska.
Here.
Earl Metzler. Mark Sherwood.
Here.
Jennifer Silver. And Karen Steele.
Here.
Also here this evening for administration is Business Administrator Jeffrey Dowd.
Thank you. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Karen, you want to start us? Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no members from the public here, though I did see your public service announcement that you sent today. Thank you.
I'm just amazed at how many people don't even know what an SAU is when I'm talking to people, so I'm trying to educate the people as far as.
I don't know if you sent it to everybody, but Karen posted something on Facebook today to let people know there was a meeting, in case they wanted to come and comment or watch. Okay, so we'll move on to the minutes from the May 28th meeting.
I move that we accept the minutes from May 28th.
Okay. Barbara makes a motion. Is
I'll
there a
second.
second? John seconds.
So there was one thing I had looked at that I just wanted to address here in the draft copy. Visibility of superintendent at the
Which page are we
schools. We are on page 2 of 3. Dated. This is the one that came through electronically, dated May 28th. And the same. Top of the page begins visibility of superintendent of the schools, SAU staff dedicated to a single district for increased accessibility and accountability of SAU staff. Increased accessibility, is the accessibility going to change if the SAU is dedicated? Have we had an issue with them being accessible because they are also servicing Hampstead? Do we see that changing if they're just servicing? What's the accessibility differential?
Well, clearly there is some, according to minutes that we see from Hampstead's meetings, that the assistant superintendent is spending 80 to 90% of their time in Hampstead. So I would assume that if we were single district and we had our own assistant superintendent here, they would be more accessible. That's
Right.
just one example.
Yeah, no, I think we had addressed the assistant superintendent and the 90% estimated time that they're spending in Hampstead. So I think that's kind of baked into it. And the accountability portion, that just, the language seemed to strike me as being a bit punitive. So if we decide to form our own SAU, I'm not certain that the accountability portion of it just strikes me as I'm not certain that I'm comfortable with that language. So certainly focus. We all agreed that the focus would be solely on the Timberlane, regional school district. I think we all agree on that. But the language increase accessibility and accountability suggests that they are not accessible now or accountable now.
Well, I would say that at least part of the time they're not accessible because they are off visiting Hampstead. I mean, getting Dr. Metzler into this meeting is sometimes difficult because he's at Hampstead, right?
Right.
Okay. So I can
And in
see.
terms of accountability, it has been an issue for the Timberlane Board, because we have had instances where the superintendent has publicly stated, you are the Timberlane Board, I'm an SAU employee, I don't report to you. We would not have that issue in a single district SAU.
Okay.
But you're welcome to amend, but those, I understand what you're saying, that I don't think it's punitive. I think it articulates what the discussions were. And it's also part of, you'll see it in the draft plan.
So
I'm
I
fine with
understand
taking it out. It's
So
fine.
increased focus, or it strikes me again, and I'm trying to stay away from this, and this has been the struggle the entire time, to keep perceived personalities and differences out of this and whatever is happening on the microscopic level right here between the two boards in the SAU unit. And saying increased accessibility and accountability suggest to me that is the core issue, and I don't necessarily think that is yet.
Would you
Okay.
like to change the word accountability to focus?
Wait, John.
Absolutely,
Let,
absolutely.
Sorry.
John?
Again, these are the minutes, and if that's how it was discussed at the meeting, these are just minutes of that meeting,
Yeah,
not the official document as far as the planning. So if it was discussed as, increased accessibility and accountability
I think
during
I
the
may have
meeting.
voiced an objection at that stage as well, but.
But it
that's
still
fair-
was,
fair point.
it's still
Fair
discussed.
point.
It's supposed to be a record of what was discussed.
Fair point.
So if it, I'm fine with it. I don't see it as punitive. I think it just is more focused. But again, I think it was discussed that way. Even you're saying, you might have brought it up then as well, but it was still
Right.
discussed. Whether it was positive or negative.
Point taken.
Any other comments on the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes? 2, 3, 4. Opposed? Abstaining? 2. 402. Okay, moving on. Let's see here. Business administrator, Mr. Dunn?
Well, good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Dow?
We have a number of requests, I believe, so I'll ask where would you like to start, or what would you like to discuss first?
Well, I guess we can start with the memo, because that's the next thing in the agenda packet.
Perfect.
Well, it's not the next thing. There are 2 pages regarding staffing, but we'll push those down past this discussion. Can you speak to the staffing and all that we have in our packets?
Some degree, yeah. I would
Oh,
hope
you
so.
can't? Okay. Well, why don't we start with that then, because that's the order.
Okay.
So we have 2 pages here, one that says, oh, they both have the same heading, but when you look, the first major heading, one says district-wide administrators and directors, and the other says district-wide administrators and directors hyphen SAU operations / functions. Now, I did ask the question, in regards to this, as to, email here. And maybe you have this answer. I asked this on, a week ago. Are there any reductions or increases in staffing reflected in these 2 documents?
There are, and I will say that I will tell you off the bat, there are 2 schedules, and both say district-wide administrators and directors, and one specifically references SAU/operations functions. So the question is, and I think it's been something that the committee has been debating, what is part of that SAU? Is it just district level? Is it what we consider to be an SAU function right now? What is it? So I've included in that broader schedule everything for administration and support that would come along with a view of that SAU as a district-wide function. So anything that would be district-wide would be captured in that schedule. What we have tended to look at the SAU as is more on the SAU and operations functions, and that's the second schedule. So that second schedule lists for administrator, superintendent, assistant superintendent, CFO, business administrator, director of HR, assistant business administrator / director of finance, business operations coordinator, transportation coordinator, director of technology, director of facilities. The broader list has, for example, director of school counseling, 6 to 12, director of special education. It includes a lot more of those district positions. On both schedules, to answer your question, and I don't make any assumptions for the committee, that's going to be up to you. I've included an assistant business administrator Director of Finance and a business operations coordinator. I don't know which way the committee is going on that, but
Wait, I'm sorry. We asked the superintendent to come up with a staffing plan for a single district SAU.
okay.
That the assumption was that he was going to come up with this, so I'm a little confused, because you're telling me you're making no assumptions, but the committee was requesting from the superintendent the staffing should we move to a single district SAU. Am I, that's what you were looking for, right, Mark?
That's what I was looking for.
And this is, so,
You had asked if there were any positions that were being added or removed.
but
So I'm simply identifying that position.
But you're saying if we move, this scenario right here is saying if we move to a single district SAU, we're ramping up our personnel.
No. What
Well,
that,
I'm counting the numbers and it's more than we have now.
okay. It would be a director of facilities would be additional, or the business operations coordinator would be additional. Currently, there's no district director of facilities. So that is an addition. You asked what the addition would be. That's what the addition would be.
Okay, well, I asked that we identify, I can't tell that, I mean,
I'm
I can tell that
identifying
now
it.
that you're saying, so that was one question that I had. So what are the additions, and then, or deletions? So there are no deletions, there are 2 additions, and,
In those
What's the
two additions,
ration-
again, I'm sorry, just so that I'm following, those 2 additions again were which 2 positions?
Over what we have right now.
Yep,
On the SAU operations function sheet,
yep,
assistant business administrator / director of finance.
yep,
Director of facilities, which is at the bottom of that list.
okay.
We also have on the broader list, director of special education 6 through 8. And that's at the bottom of that list. So those would be the positions which would be in addition to what is there now.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
So you had emailed the superintendent asking for a proposed staffing scenario for a single district SAU,
Correct,
should we go that way.
yes.
So we don't have that. Is that correct?
I don't think this is what it is, no.
Is that what this is?
You have 2 of them.
So
So,
this is, so our proposed staffing for a single district SAU is more employees than what we currently have for a combined.
Correct, with the
So that's what the
stipul-
superintendent believes that we would need if we move to a single district SAU.
I think 1 more employee is needed currently, and depending on which way this committee made their recommendation, the other 2 are listed to, again, whatever is the will of the committee on that. They're both there, Director of Facilities, Business Operations Coordinator, both are there. So it would be probably one or the other,
So it sounds like our current SAU is overstaffed then.
overstaffed.
Well, I don't know how else to interpret that, but, okay.
So I'm trying to
overstaffed.
understand, when we go to a single district SAU, we no longer have the Hampstead district. You're saying we need 3 additional people on top of what we already have?
I think at least 2.
2,
That's what
for
I'm saying,
fewer
what we're
people and fewer schools and less a district. And
Okay.
how do you come up with this justification?
Things are fairly thin right now upstairs, and I think that is where those come from. And looking at where the needs are right now, that's what's been identified.
okay,
If I'm not if it would be better to speak with the superintendent on that, I will put out there, you've asked me for some information, I've described both lists, and if it would be more suitable to have that discussion with the superintendent, feel free. I'm certainly happy to walk through what is different on the list and the
Okay.
rationale for that.
thank you. What I need from the superintendent, and could we take this as an action item? I need a rationale for any additions or deletions, and specifically, if they are additions, why they were not in the proposed budget for the SAU for this year. Or the Timberlane budget for this past year. So all of a sudden, I'm learning we're thin in the SAU, that we don't have enough staff, that if we go to a single district SAU, I'm gonna have to increase my staffing but I've been sitting on these boards for 2 years, and this is the first I'm hearing.
Excellent, Kathy. We have that, so we'll take that back to the superintendent.
Does anybody else have any?
I just wanted to comment, for the people at home, we are looking at the SAU operations and functions. Is that kind of the current staffing? It seems rather heavy because it's 9 plus 13, so we have 22 employees on this one?
It includes such things as the director of technology, director of facilities. When I look at what is, when you look at this list and you say, well, what's curriculum-based? What's district-based that's curriculum-based? And what's district-based that's sort of everything else? And so when you look at that, then you would add maybe the director of technology, say add the director of technology. You have a director of technology, but that would be a position that would perhaps be part of consideration in that grouping of positions.
Okay, so, but we have 22 people on this smaller list, and we have 35 on the larger list?
Most of those are employees you already have.
Okay.
Okay, we need to be comparing, I think your question
Apples to
speaks to, we need to compare apples to apples.
Yeah.
When we have an action item right now for the superintendent that we need to look at the current SAU with 14 employees. If we move to a single district SAU, what are the additions and deletions to those employees? We can't mix and match. We can't bring all this together as we do a withdrawal plan. It's going to, no offense to the Board of Education, be very confusing if you start to draw Timberlane people into the SAU withdrawal. So I think we need to be, Mark, we need to compare apples to apples.
Perfect.
So for the next time, we need to bring SAU.
Madam Chair, I believe that there are two lists because there was a great deal of conversation that transpired at the last withdrawal committee meeting where they were trying to differentiate between what position served as a district level one, which one was not. Mrs. Silver gave many examples of different districts and how they were formulated. And so what I believe the charge was that was conveyed to Mr. Dowd and the superintendent was to provide lists associated with the comparisons of what other districts do because they have their higher level, and that would be some of the higher end district personnel. That's what the larger list is. And that's to give you the broader picture because there was a lot of dialogue that happened last time that talked about, well, some of these actually, they're district-wide, but as a single district, they'd actually be considered like an SAU top district because we really wouldn't have an SAU, it would really just be top district. So that list was generated to kind of give you an idea of what that would look like, to give you the total number of, so you could look at, see the total number of Timberlane top administrators in correlation with how that would pan out with an SAU if you were to mix them. The second one was, and I do believe that even with those added positions, it is the superintendent's recommendation that those positions be added in order to adequately staff even the single digit, even though there are, it would be an increase of the numbers that we have right now. So, and I'm pretty sure that's the superintendent's position on that.
Okay, I
He's not here
appreciate
to
the
discuss it, but-
clarification. And that's fine if that's his position. I need a written rationale for this position. We can't take these lists. If this committee is going to have, if he's not available, and even if he is available, we need to have something in writing for rationale, one way or another. So that's.
That's a new directive from the last,
Well, no. Could you please identify any reductions or increases in staffing? Perhaps identify current positions, what reductions in positions there will be, and what additional positions will be required, if any. The rationale for any changes will also be needed for the withdrawal plan. That's as of June 12th's email I received no response to. So that, I understand that maybe that it wasn't clear, and that's why when I got these two lists, and when Mark emailed me,
I was confused as well, right.
that I asked for more clarification. So I guess that's, if the superintendent is unclear after this meeting, please have him contact me, because I think, sorry, go ahead.
No
Karen.
worries. I was just going to say that most people are used to seeing the budget as it's presented, right? We usually see what last year's actual spend, this year's budget, the next proposed. And I think the best way to communicate to people what the plan is to keep that format. And so I'd like to be able to see the list of employees in that same format as you do today. Or we
Okay.
did before we got the list.
Okay, so,
I'm not following.
So,
SAU specific,
yeah,
that's what you mean, right?
follow the same format as they present the proposed budget these days. Well, I guess now they just have a single line for salaries, but at least back in 2013, 2012, 2013, they showed all of the individual employees. And so I would expect that that's what people are going to want to see, is there's this many employees in 2017, 2018, this many in 2018, 2019. Proposed to go to a single district SAU, it would be this many employees.
John and then Jen.
So are we intending to integrate a SU staffing list into our document at all? 'Cause we're not intending to tell, you know, what the staffing is gonna be, right? As part of our plan, like who's gonna be at the SAU, who, you know, because the superintendent would be you know, whoever the superintendent of the new SAU would be the one that would kind of work through what
Well,
they want with the school board.
he or she would, but we have to show within the plan that we are covering the services as required by RSA that the superintendent has to provide for their districts.
Right.
So we do, in essence, have to give some staffing, some reasonable staffing plan. Not to say that that's cast in stone. If they come down after we withdraw, they're not gonna say, you said this was your staffing plan, but it's not. We have to make sure that we have what is a reasonable staffing plan. We can't say we're cutting 50% of the SAU staff, and this is, so, yeah, so I guess short answer is, we do need to have at least some staffing plan that's going to provide a basis for coverage of SAU services as required by RSA.
The expectation is the current staffing is already fulfilling that.
Well,
If we just carried on with that same staffing, they would still
Check
be
the box.
fulfilling that, because with a little bit more bandwidth in their workload because of Hampstead not being part of that.
correct.
So at a
Well-
minimal, I mean, not even minimal, you know, we could just say the current staff works fine, you know, without having to add additionals in. That's where the confusion is. Are we going to say, you know, take, you know, Dr. Metzler's list of what he thinks would be the best one for staffing, and then also put a money figure on there to also say this will cause an increase in the budget as well, as an impact to the district?
I don't think, Jen, go ahead.
My concern with this is, so, this, I don't know what to call it. I'm going to call it proposed staffing, just for lack of, I don't know what you want to call it. This proposed staffing for single district SAU, I'm going to assume, is also the proposed staffing if they're so if we're not going to withdraw in 2020, this is the proposed staffing for 2020 SAU55 combined Timberlane Hampstead.
I don't think that would be fair.
So why would we need more people if it was just Timberlane, but not those recommendations if it's Timberlane and Hampstead combined?
Well, I'll speak to one position being, let's say, the Director of Technology, where that may in other districts be viewed as an SAU-type position, administrative position. In our district, or in our SAU, we've chosen to keep those positions at the district level. So when I list that here, that might be a common SAU function in other districts. However, when it's listed here, it might be a common SAU function in other districts, therefore it's listed here, but we already have the position.
So if we already have a Director of Technology, then why are we adding a Director of Technology up there?
It's not an ad.
It's not.
Well, I think that's the issue. We don't know what's an add, we don't know what's a deletion. I can't tell from this list what's an add and what's a
All right, I
deletion.
think I'm not wording this well.
I think there's, in fairness, I think that what you've just said provides a lot of clarity. Take our current 14-person SAU structure and just tell us what it would look like if it were just integrated into the district?
So
Just speaking to those 14 positions,
That would be
Right.
great.
perfect.
when Mark and I talked about this and tried to take a stab at this, we had this conversation, we got a little bit caught up in rolling up current district positions to SAU, but in reality, this withdrawal committee is not looking at Timberlane positions. The Timberlane positions that exist are still the Timberlane positions that will exist.
Correct.
Those aren't, so I'm cautious and not really wanting to move that up to SAU administration. I would just say, okay, cross it right off. We don't need that because Timberlane already has that. So we wouldn't be going without that function. Obviously, there would be some sort of reorganization that would happen if we go through a withdrawal, and maybe that position would move from Timberlane to SAU, but
And the tough thing is, there would be no SAU
exactly.
after.
Exactly. So when we looked at it, we talked about, I don't really think it's wise to be even looking at those Timberlane positions because that's really not the charge of this committee.
Perfect.
Well, except if they are providing some of the the supervisory things that are in the regulation, that's the main reason we would look, right?
Right,
They're
right. So
crossover.
Yeah.
I think there's a better understanding now what we're looking for this staffing. And I don't want to belabor this topic too long, because I think if you look at the draft plan, Jen and Mark and Karen, you've already done a good job of addressing this staffing. So let's move on, because I think we have a lot to cover. If everybody's okay with that, because I think we'll come back to this when we get into the plan, and you'll see how it's addressed already in the plan. Does that make sense? Because you've already addressed this. I don't. So let's move on. So the next thing in the packet is, and Karen and John, I know you're taking the lead on this. This is pro forma budget questions. Have you had a chance to look at this memo that was dated the 17th? Is this answering why budget lines 2,900, 225 through 2,900, 290 are part of the operating budget and not salary lines? So
It wasn't specific to a specific year, and that was what, I guess, I thought that we were asking. So, like, if we were looking at, in this, it gives a general explanation of each one, but not specific. Like, for example, in 2016, 2017, what was that, the one before? The sick leave redemption was, $55,000 in 2016, 2017. And so some of those numbers that stood out, it was, we're looking for understanding, such as the other employee benefits. So in 2017, 2018, other employee benefits was $47,663, but in 2018, 2019, it was budgeted at $115,069. So that is other
Just a point
employee
of-
benefits.
She's talking about something different than what the pro forma is. This speaks to the pro forma budget only. You're raising questions that are answered on another sheet further into the packet. So I just don't want there to be any more confusion.
Thank you.
Okay,
Moving forward.
thanks. Okay, so let's make sure we have the pro forma budget now,
Right,
which I
it's about the
just
pro forma
found.
budget itself. Mhm.
So, on line 2,900, 225,
Sick leave redemption, yep.
saying that is not a salary, although the expenditures would be considered earnings. I'm not sure, does that answer your question on the pro forma budget? 29,221.
I mean, there's still the other employee benefits was at 50,000. And again, it doesn't, even in the pro forma, but it's not always clear as to what that would be, again, given what it is today. I think that was what we were looking for, but if we need to talk about the real numbers first, that would make more sense, I suppose.
You wanna talk about, so you wanna skip the
defer
pro
to her.
forma and move to
Yeah, so like the zeroing out of the telephone and the postage.
Yeah.
So that still kind of doesn't make sense, because it's still going to be an expense.
Correct.
So that's why John and I didn't understand why it had been zeroed out on your pro forma, because it's still money that would need to be spent outside of TRSD.
Correct. And so right now, TRSD is reimbursed for those expenses from SAU. So technically, the money already goes through SAU, or the expenditure already goes through SAU and is reimbursed. That's why it's captured on the next page under loss of revenue. However, that's the true, correct accounting perspective on it. The reality of it, though, is that without the SAU formal structure, we would have an increase in that expense, whether it's through additional expense or loss of revenue, of the amounts approximately as you'd see there. So I think that it would be fair to include those as additional expenses on those line items, whether it's through loss of revenue or through the actual expenditure itself. It would be fair to include those. And if this committee would prefer, going forward, I would rather speak one language on this, and if that language is to show that as the expense, it's a little bit easier to see that way and a little bit more clear, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, that would be helpful for me, because I'm used to seeing what the budgets look like, and then to see a budget number just go straight to zero, it's confusing.
And really, it's more loss of revenue than it is expenditure, but for purposes of what this committee is probably looking at, let's keep it simple.
So we
I'm
don't
fine
have
with
to
That would be
refer to
helpful.
another budget.
Yeah, we don't have to look back at what the revenue is from the SAU, from TRSD, because it's all kind of
So the-
circular.
And so this loss of revenue of 17,000, what lines does that include?
I believe you'll see that there is a loss of utility communication and supplies offset net revenue, and a loss of 17,000, loss of other revenue. I'd have to pull my worksheets out.
Well, and there's the office rental piece as well. The
Correct.
Hampstead portion of that, 42,000.
Correct. Well, yeah,
And the loss of other revenue is only the Hampstead portion.
loss of rental income net revenue, that's where it's showing the net revenue, that's a few lines up, that's a 10,068, the Hampstead portion.
So what's that?
Loss of other revenue, 17,000, that would be what would be missing from Timberlane's revenue stream,
What is that, though?
I don't understand that.
which,
Well, Is that the loss of $17,000 worth of revenue from Hampstead into Timberlane's budget?
their share of that, yes. And in
The-
fact,
Sorry, their share. Is the 17,000 what Hampstead's paying, or are they paying only 23% of 17,000?
well, I'm going to go one more line up to the 6,500. That's actually a check that Hampstead will write directly to Timberlane to cover any support that's associated with any hardware or software support provided by Timberlane. So that's a direct. The loss of other revenue, looking at about 17,000, representing that which is net to Timberlane of other revenues that Hampstead is not paying. I don't want to make it more complicated than it has to be.
But what is that? What are they paying for?
There are various other software programs and different things that come in to Timberlane from, and I can get a full listing of what that looks like. That part, I can put that on a separate schedule to show how those come in, whether it's an offset to an expense or a specific line item itself. Why don't I can get that schedule for you. That might make a little bit more sense than this. If I lay that out, you can see what actually comes in directly from Hampstead, and what comes in from SAU, and what portion of that comes from Hampstead's share of SAU. Would that make it easier?
I think so, because when I
Okay.
see that, I'm like looking at these two sheets thinking, that's like, you're referring to this, but this looks pretty, I mean, other than a couple items,
So is
pretty
there,
negotiable.
okay, again, I'm looking at it from a budget view, and I'm looking at, like, for this year, 2018-19, Timberlane gives the SAU 1.65 million, and Hampstead gives the SAU 0.5 million. Okay, so beyond those numbers, are you saying there's more money that transfers between Timberlane and Hampstead and the SAU?
We have money that transfers from Hampstead to Timberlane directly, the 6,500.
Okay.
We also have money that goes from SAU back to Timberlane.
Okay.
But in
And
the
so some
net-
of that
sorry.
is this telephone for 9250, the postage for 4,000, the in-district travel of 9,000, and the supplies of 8,500. So those are 4 items from the budget that you had zeroed out in the pro forma.
Correct.
So your next version, you're going to put those number back as to what you expect it would be with a single district SAU, and then remove that as revenue on your other part, right?
Correct, if that makes sense.
Perfect.
Yes.
That
Okay.
would be great.
I think a lot of this, unfortunately, it is an intertwined relationship. And where an expense may be borne by Timberlane and reimbursed by the SAU, the expense is there, so we're not really increasing the expense, we just lose the revenue. But coming to a common definition and a common understanding of how to reflect that in terms of actual expense is very helpful. And if that's the way that we're going to do it,
Elusive.
It'll make a lot more, sense.
Can I just clarify, just so I just want to make sure we're 100% on the same page. So the purpose of putting it, instead of, I understand from accounting purposes, the correct way is probably exactly what's in here, to do it as a loss of revenue, but for our sense of having a plan that's readable to the general public and makes sense, we're looking to know what is Timberlane's current cost under the current structure versus what will the Timberlane cost be should we be on our own.
Perfect. And we'll talk about that in terms of net impact, and we'll talk about that in the expense lines themselves.
We just want a single thing. How much is it going to cost as a single district SAU without any other, having to refer to any other budgets? Just what's it going to cost?
And I don't know if you had a chance to look at this, because this was the kind of rough draft that John and I had put together, and I think that was helpful, again,
Is
because
this in the packets, Karen?
this is in the packet, yeah, and it's called fiscal analysis. It's to be inserted at page 16 of the plan.
Okay, wait.
Very
It's
colorful.
got the,
It's
bubbles. It's got colors.
Very colorful.
I would not want to
That was a
This
disappoint.
one, this one.
Yes,
That
that's
one,
the
the
one.
blue balloons.
So what we've got there, right, is we've got the actual spend of 2017, 2018 of the SAU, the actual spend in 2018, 2019, the budgeted for 2019, 20, or 19, or 2020, and then we've got a projected. So these are numbers that John and I just came up with based on your pro forma and previous budgets, and so getting some validation on some of those numbers in the same format would be helpful.
I think a lot of this is really just seeking what is that format. And if that is the format that works best, then,
I think that's nice and simple.
yep.
Yeah, this is,
I don't know about the colors. I don't know if I know that many colors, but
Well, I've
Karen
gotten
can color
feedback
code it
that
for
I
you.
have to
Yeah.
change all this so that when it's printed in black and white, it'll look better. So trust me, for the plan, we'll adjust
yeah,
it
it
all.
needs to be black and white.
But
for
I
the plan.
did simplify, right? So I just took the executive salaries and the support salaries and then the salaries total. So it's not like every individual. I did simplify that. But then this is the basic format that you guys provide as the SAU budget every year anyway. So I just thought that would be a logical
that's why.
extrapolation.
I think it's important to remember that when putting together the pro forma, a lot of it that really was put together with the idea of understanding how the relationship works, what is borne by Timberlane, what's reimbursed by SAU, what's paid directly by Hampstead. We're having that discussion. I hope the committee has an understanding at least of that relationship, and having such, if we agree that this is the format presented in, I think that has done what I've asked.
If the
I'd
rest
like
of the
to do.
committee agrees, I mean,
Yeah.
it makes sense for me.
Yeah.
I appreciate that understanding of why it was zeroed out, and that it is, but it isn't, because it's,
Yeah.
but if we could build it back into what the actual cost would be.
You understand it. Let's look at it from a
Right.
net impact on the expense side. Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So that's why in the packet you'll also see, like, the TRSD budget, and then with adding the SAU under it to have one budget to look at, which is what I asked for, because we're going through trying to look at, well, the SAU budget, but afterwards, it's gonna be one budget as a single district. So I asked Jeff if we could combine the SAU with Timberlane and see how that budget would be structured. And to be able to view it as one. And then you can look at, us paying 100% of the current costs versus what we pay now. So there's some columns on there to kind of look at it, because, again, going back and forth between multiple budgets and looking at it, there are pieces that Timberlane pays, and then they get reimbursed because the phone system is owned by Timberlane. So they pay that bill and then they get money back. And,
But that
that
goes
would all-
away, right? with the
Well,
new
it would
one.
all be looking, because you wouldn't have in a single budget, you wouldn't have a revenue reimbursing itself back for, it would be a cost, phones. There would be no negative in to offset a positive there,
Right,
or
yeah.
a positive to offset a negative. So, it's all in one budget.
Yeah, I think that was great, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Right, so, but
it's a-
we mentioned, putting it all in one thing, and so we need to, for me, I need to start looking at it as a complete budget and the cost. So that's why I asked for that piece of it.
Is it,
Right,
but the SAU budget is a single line item within the Timberlane budget?
Right now it is.
it
yes.
is now, but it would have to be broken out, just like, it will go into the existing Timberlane lines once we become if we become a single district.
Yeah,
SAU.
no, I understand. I'm just trying to think again, for just, I don't want to confuse it, I don't know.
That's a
We'll
separate
get
budget.
into
We'll get
it.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to
For,
that.
for discussion,
Okay.
I had that created by Jeff, thank you, which I
Yeah,
appreciate.
so, any other questions on this memo that's dated June 17th? We all set with that?
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Then we have shared services, an update on that. And I think this is an update from before. I just have a question. When you look at something like Durham Services and you say cost savings, you say savings highly likely. That means that right now, as a combined, with two districts, it's highly likely that we have savings?
We did not bid that out as two separate districts, and it's likely that if they were to be bid out as combined districts, we would be getting better pricing than we would be getting
Is
on
it-
individual contracts.
Is it currently bid out as a single, by district? We're not in a contract with Durham, with Hampstead, are we not?
It's separate contracts, but we did not ask for we did not ask for a bid with both districts and then a separate bid with each district. And we did do that with First Student, where each district has its own contract. And when we did the bidding there, we said, hey, if you'd like to do both Hampstead and Timberlane school districts, give us a price. Give us your price just to do Hampstead or Timberlane in case either district decided to go with another competitor. So we didn't do that with Durham's services. I would think it would be a similar thing, that if we bid individual districts,
Okay, but the thing is, we're looking at present time right now, and I think to say savings highly likely, we're asking for what's currently happening now, and to say right now that we're saving money on Durham services would not be a correct statement, because right now we're not. So I'm not trying to say that you're trying to be deceitful, but my concern is somebody looks at this, that's looking at whether we're withdrawing or not, and says, oh, we withdraw, we're gonna lose the savings that we currently have with Durham services. But right now, we're not saving by being by having both districts. Does that make sense?
I think we are saving, but we don't have individual district bids to show what that savings would be.
Okay.
So each district has its own contract.
Absolutely.
So there is no combined. So it's
They were
not,
bid together,
but it's not a shared contract. Each district has its own contract.
as its own contract.
So I don't really see that as a combined saving. So if we said tomorrow we're split, they're not all of a sudden going to charge us more because we have our own contract.
The next contract that we bid out may not come in as favorably, and
I mean,
that's.
but that's a big question mark.
Yeah, I don't think we can make, I think you have to, you're on the same lines as I am. You can't that's a hypothetical.
Correct.
We don't want hypotheticals. We need to look at what's going on right now. Because if you're saying hypothetically, we could save money out here, I don't think that's this. You've got to look at what's currently happening, because I'm the voter, and I'm going to say, so if we leave, is it going to cost more for Durham services? And the answer would be, no, we have our own contract. We do not have an SAU contract, right?
We don't. So let's contrast that with First Student.
I understand the First Student is different because we saved 100,000. Even though Hampstead went out on their own contract, First Student awarded us that 100,000. But we had this discussion last time, right, John?
Yep.
To say that you can't make that assumption that this is going to happen again.
No, and I think that each district in both cases has their own individual contracts with the vendor in both cases. I can just say what, with First Student, we do know now currently where it's at. If we were to leave, if Timberlane were to separate from SAU55, the contract that you're in right now would stay in place
There would be no penalty.
in both cases.
Do SAUs ever work together to get savings? So, say we had our own SAU and Hampstead had their own. Is there anything that says that two SAUs can't go in together to try and get savings as well on contracts because, we're close enough and
I don't think there'd be anything that would prohibit that.
right. So there's nothing that says we couldn't try that in the future as well, just as a savings. It'd be two different contracts.
Yep.
Hey,
Hey, our contract's up, your contract's up. Would you care to bid together?
Right. So, there's nothing that says you can't do that in the future either. It's just, and then that's another hypothetical of what could happen in the future.
Right. Jen?
Well, and the other thing that isn't prohibited, and this came out last time when there was a lot of back and forth about this bus contract, was discussion about if we didn't go out to bid and just had renegotiated the contract, that perhaps we would have had a better deal with First Student, having renegotiated the current contract versus going out to bid. Our policy, I believe, is that it goes out to bid, but, there's, that was part of the discussion, if I recall, right?
Yeah. And one other thing on First Student. You're saying Hampstead is saving 400,000 over 5 years. I didn't quite follow that. Why is that? I thought Timberlane only was saving 100,000 a year. How is Hampstead? Because we need to look at that as part of the impact on Hampstead. Where's the savings for Hampstead in First Student?
It is the difference between the bid with both districts and the individual bid that Hampstead received.
But Hampstead went out on their own. So that's a hypothetical savings, because they chose to go out on their own. So
What do you mean go out on
we
their own?
cannot say that there's an impact to Hampstead over 5 years of 400,000 because they chose to go out on their own contract. That they didn't go. It's not. There's no SAU contract for transportation. Correct?
No, and there never has been.
Okay, so
Well, not that I know of.
So to say that it's an impact on Hampstead, does anybody follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. It's
okay.
not making sense to me either.
Okay.
It's the same thing. So when
It's
that
the same thing.
went out, it's the
Yes.
same thing as Timberlane. So when that went out to bid, it was bid on each one individually and then bid on them together.
And when they bid on them together, that's where the derived savings.
Correct. So Timberlane saved money.
But Hampstead chose not to take that savings. So to
And
say
then
that
and
they
then First
lost
Student
that savings
and then
over
First
5
Student
years,
honored it anyway.
they honored the savings to Timberlane. And I don't know as they honored it to Hampstead. I don't know
Looks
what
like they
Hampstead's
did.
contract looked like.
Did they?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was a derived savings even though it may have been unintentional on their part.
Right.
Correct.
Right, okay. Well, that's an impact that we need to note in the withdrawal study to Hampstead. It's gonna cost them potentially an extra 100,000 a year.
But looking at that, the same as, it may or it may not.
It may or may not. I guess
That's a
I'll,
big hypothetical on both sides.
So it
I'll
is
throw in a
hypothetical.
sentence, in the impact, if everybody's agreeable with that.
What's the sentence?
Well, the sentence is, currently there's a savings to both districts due to the fact, due to the way the bidding process occurred, there's a potential impact to Hampstead on a future contract should we withdraw. That's all. I'm not gonna get
John
into
made a
it.
point, too, that there's no reason we couldn't still do the same thing even if we were two SAUs.
Yeah, we could, yeah.
So it's not necessarily an impact.
So
Potential.
if I want to get a cable deal with Verizon, and my neighbor does too, just because we're neighbors doesn't mean that Verizon has to do that.
Right.
But if I say to Verizon, I want a cable deal and a telephone deal and an internet deal, then they will, because it's the one entity. So there's no guarantee. We can certainly ask, but there's probably less impetus for them to agree to future savings with two separate SAUs as opposed to one shared SAU.
But when I got
That's-
mosquito spraying I got my neighbors to go in on it, and we all got a discount.
And
because
I
we
did the
went
same with
together.
trash removal,
So-
which is probably similar to Durham Services, right? Where my neighbors and I said, hey, if we all do this together, what deal can we get?
Right.
So there was an implied savings. He gave us
Hampstead
all
has,
blanket.
Hampstead has a lot of neighbors,
Yeah,
so I don't know that Timberlane would be the one they'd be looking to. They go with
understood.
Chester,
But-
Salem, Derry.
Yeah.
To your point, though, Mark, that it wasn't, they were two separate that we didn't, it wasn't bidding on it as an SAU. It was two completely separate bids, like two completely separate bid processes
We're referring to First Student of Durham now.
for a student.
Okay.
I thought that's what you were referring to, no?
I jumped back to
Sorry.
Durham for the trash removal analogy.
Okay.
Why can't you keep up?
All right, so.
I couldn't.
Okay, I think we've hit this, Barbara.
But I just want to make really clear, when you say cost savings, it's cost savings if we stay if we do not withdraw. Is that the correct sense?
All I can tell you is that with First Student, for example, and I'll
No,
contrast the two.
I don't want specifics. I just want
Currently enjoyed cost savings.
Yes.
currently, so these are the cost savings because we are together.
Together, correct.
Okay, it wasn't explained anywhere.
If you go down to the next one, Frontline Technologies, savings likely to Timberlane of about $2,000
So that's an,
over what we're,
withdraw, it will cost us 2,000 more.
if you withdraw, it would cost you $2,000 less than what SAU pays right now.
Oh my gosh, I'm so confused now.
You lost me
Okay,
then.
can we go, all right, let's just go, okay, can I take a stab at
ahead, you
this?
take a stab.
Okay. Durham Services, savings highly likely, does that mean currently or savings highly likely if we withdraw?
Savings, the combined SAU presents cost savings
So we get it today. We enjoy cost savings
Correct.
today.
today. I can't tell you what that amount is. We didn't bid it out separately, as Kim pointed out.
Okay, so now skipping down to Frontline Technologies, savings likely estimate of 2,000. So savings likely now or savings likely if we split?
If you split. What
Jeez.
Okay,
would cost, and so would cost SAU 14,000 would cost Timberlane alone 12,000.
So
okay.
you're changing the sense of this as we go through the document. It's not consistent.
It's difficult on, for example, the First Student, that's a multi-year contract engagement.
That's
But
okay.
I think- Wait, Barbara, calm down.
So I can't tell you what the savings are going to be next year.
No, Barbara.
I know what they are.
Okay, what Barbara's getting at is that in one sense, you're saying a savings highly likely means we're saving money being part of the SAU, and then next one, you're saying savings likely, but the savings is to us if we withdraw from the SAU. So
That's
we
why I
need-
want to go through each one.
I think, yeah, we need to, and then it needs to be, this needs to be reworked, because we can't, you can't keep using, you can't say savings likely if we stay, and then in the 2 lines later say savings likely if we leave, because it's confusing to
Without changing the wording.
committee.
Okay,
Yeah,
so Greater Haverhill Chamber of Commerce, savings likely
Could be $295 a year.
if we split or if we
We
stay?
split, insignificant, right,
so if we split, it costs us $295 less?
correct.
So perhaps
Okay.
at the very top of this, if we said, as a standalone SAU, then savings likely or savings unlikely, that would
Yeah, yeah.
create some
consistent.
clarity.
Either
We're
that or
almost
you
done.
say savings versus cost.
We're almost done. Let's-
Right,
let's-
increased
let's-
cost,
let's
increased
just keep
cost
going.
likely or unlikely.
Jen's on a
increased
roll.
savings.
Okay, let's keep going. We'll get the.
Time clock plus savings likely of $8,000 if we split?
Correct.
This is helpful because I read it the other way when I first
I
looked
did
at this
too.
packet, yeah. So safe schools, that's something pending, savings like, sorry, jump back up to the top. Savings likely, nominal, savings likely. Okay. Okay, so that's it. That wasn't,
Okay,
that was
that's not
okay.
bad. Well, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that.
I will say the biggest factor right now is the last one, the Tower Technologies. I'm still waiting for their pricing.
So is this savings highly likely if we split or if we stay?
The savings are likely, the total savings are uncertain. So it would cost less for Timberlane to have its version of Infinite Visions than what SAU pays now for the three entities,
So
Okay.
it's savings if we split.
if you split.
Okay.
That one's on which one?
The very bottom one, the last one.
Tyler, okay.
That's
Savings.
a
It's
relevant
Okay.
material number, so I'm looking for them to be
Sorry, that's what, relevant? or
relevant.
Okay.
Yeah, as opposed to the $295 for the,
Thank you.
it's not really material.
Did they have
Chamber-
any idea
Chamber of
when they'll
Commerce.
get that to you?
Could have said,
Sorry?
Did they give you any idea when they could get that to you?
We have calls going back and forth, Ken and I. I think they're having a difficult time trying to understand what that breakout would look like, that's all.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Just real fast,
Yeah.
and if it can't be explained in 30 seconds, I will, mute my mic here. So for the Tyler Technologies, savings highly likely, should we separate and become a standalone? Why? Because the cost we are expecting to incur is less than 23% of the offset that we're currently receiving from Hampstead? Why would it be cost efficient?
I believe that it would cost less, and I believe that the cost savings would be there to have your own database.
Okay.
However, what,
Because of the simplicity of having the other Hampstead removed?
it's a smaller database, not by much, but yes, essentially.
Okay, thank you.
There is one slight caveat there, and there probably would be some costs associated with actually breaking the databases
breaking it
apart.
up.
Yeah, breaking our current database into multiple databases. That's another thing that they're working on.
Okay.
That would be a one-time cost.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Okay, so I think we're almost all set with this. I have two quick questions. One's a question, one's an action. The audit, do we have any date as to when the SAU audit is going to be?
Everything
completed?
everything is in, so I'll follow up tomorrow and see what the holdup is. We
So
did
the
receive a report back.
actuarial data is done?
It is.
Okay, great. We do have an SAU meeting scheduled for Monday. It'd be great if we could have that.
Yeah.
I
Agreed.
know, I'm just saying, just,
I don't, I'll be frank with you, Kim, I don't
No.
really know what's holding it up. It should be.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just that trying to get it to this committee before,
So
And then-
who currently has it? I mean, who has the next step?
We have, when the actual report comes in, the numbers from that report get reviewed and incorporated into our audited financial statements. And our audit firm finalizes those numbers. So the actuarial report is with them, and I believe those numbers should be incorporated, if not already. Once those are incorporated, there's a piece that I have to do to finalize a management discussion and analysis, with discussion on the actuarial report and its impact on our financial statements. So,
Okay, so it's currently sitting with the auditor, is what you're saying?
yeah.
Okay.
I have a piece on my end, but I really need to see what our financials look like to complete that as well, and they have the actuarial report.
Okay.
okay. And one other action item, I would like to see the numbers, because Karen speaks to this moving forward. All payouts on compensatory time for this fiscal year up to 1 June. By personnel.
Is that SAU? Is that
SAU,
Timberline?
SAU,
Okay.
yeah.
Can I say that again?
All payouts in the current fiscal year up through June 1 or May 31st.
So this
for
this
SAU
one
employees.
For 2019? Are you asking for this one for 2019?
Yeah, yes. Yes,
Okay,
Yeah.
so we just want this for the current, for 2019 up to 1 June.
up to 1 June, yeah, exactly. That's what we need.
From when to when?
The current fiscal year up through May 31st, because we haven't closed it out, and we are not gonna have it closed out by the time we get ready to go to the public hearing. Well, it will be close. But We know we already have payouts, and those would be something moving forward that we are anticipating we won't have.
And you want it in the format of that budget, of that sheet there,
Yeah, this is very nice.
but we don't have the full numbers yet. You just want it populated up until May 1, so those numbers could change.
May 31st.
So end of month.
31st.
May.
Because that end of month financial would have been done.
And you're anticipating rolling forward that will be something that we will not encounter, you said? Explain. I'm not following.
It would not be to all SAU employees, but there's a substantial amount of compensatory time that is paid out to employees per year. I would not anticipate, it's not standard practice from what I've been told, to have payouts like that in terms of
To salaried employees.
to salaried employees. So we would project that we would not have that going forward.
When you're talking about payouts, are you talking about unclaimed sick days or vacation or,
I'm talking about,
The comp time buyout? So the comp time buyout, we actually paid more to the administrative staff than to the support staff. Last year.
2015, 16, 10, 5.
Okay, remind me what the comp time buyout is again?
So just like you're an exempt employee, if you work weekends or holidays, you don't get paid for them because
Correct.
you have a salary. So 3 years ago, the SAU board passed a policy that says even exempt employees of the SAU can get cash payout for compensatory time. Instead of, say, take off Tuesday because you worked all weekend, put in your hours. And you can apparently even put in hours from years prior, and then you'll get paid at what you make today, not what you got paid 3 years ago.
So this is basically overtime for salaried employees.
Exactly.
I don't know if that'd be correct. Overtime would suggest that it's overtime, right? So if I work 14 hours a day, there's no comp time. But I have a contract that says that I'll work a certain number of days per year. If I work additional days, that's where the comp time would be.
And so
by
why-
policy, if you're working on nights and weekends, you are eligible for comp time.
Okay?
So it's not based on the number of days.
It's not
It's
really
based
time,
on-
it's pay.
So why are we assuming this will not be effect in the future? Are we not expecting people to work nights and weekends in the, I'm trying to understand why this won't be an ongoing expense,
Because
potential.
potentially salaried employees who are non-exempt would not be paid compensatory time unless it would be an unusual case.
This
So-
is something that we're currently doing, so
Yes.
we're projecting that in the future, with the future SAU employees, this will not be the case.
With new contracts.
Correct.
So we're predicting what the new contracts will be for a standalone, for a new SAU.
Correct.
Okay, I'm not
This would
certain
be
that, I'm
more
not
Would be a
certain.
different
practice.
policy. We're basically saying that with the new SAU, we wouldn't have this policy.
Yeah, is that up for us, is that in our bailiwick to decide what, I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either.
Well, I can take it back to the Timberlane board.
Which will be a different board by that time as well.
It
Yeah,
would
I
be
mean,
a
so it's a
different-
different,
well-
that's not in our purview, I don't think.
But we can.
They have
cer-
the
We're
option.
we're talking about hypotheticals and not wanting to put hypotheticals in. What this would be doing is hypothetically saying future boards will make decisions on future SAU contracts in varying from what we currently have. I mean, I can't predict the future. I don't have a magic 8 ball, and I think by doing that, I think it's beyond our purview, and that is making a prediction potentially, I'll just leave it there. I don't think that's what we're charged with doing.
Barbara?
I would say that one of the advantages that we have is that we have more local control of the budget, including
We
the
do not.
contracts. Well, I mean,
The
not
future
this,
board
not
will.
this study, but
Right, so we
the
don't-
Timberlane as a district.
We cannot be projecting, I'm uncomfortable projecting what a future Timberlane board will decide.
Mm-hmm.
A, it's not our purview. B, we're not the future Timberlane board.
Correct.
So I don't think we should be touching it.
Okay.
So either way, we're still gonna need to understand what that is for this current year.
Yes, we do. We need to understand what it is.
So we need to understand the current cost, but
Yeah.
Well, we're getting it
I
now.
agree with Mark, though, with other things that we have no say over it once it, you know,
True.
goes forward. If
So-
it gets voted in, this committee has nothing to do with it.
So that might need to be adjustment in that budget that you just drafted.
So if we're finished with that?
Yeah.
I did notice that there was a retirement incentive paid out, and I was just wondering because that does affect things, because usually what happens in a retirement incentive is somebody gives their retirement date, and we save money in some fashion. Could you just go into a little bit about what the retirement incentive criteria are, and if we know the retirement dates of anybody, and how we're saving money with this? That would be under the 2016, 2017 salaries. And that would be the business administrator's retirement incentive of $25,200. So,
I can get a more detailed explanation. Those are captured in the benefits sheets, which I'm not sure that I have, and I would be someone who'd be used to articulate without having that specifically in front of me. But I'm more than happy to share what that would be.
so do you know how many people have participated in the retirement incentive plan?
Not off the top of my head, no. No, it looks like from at least the 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, at least the way that they've been captured, it looks like it would be one.
Okay. And do you know basically how that's structured? Somebody gives their retirement date and usually they start going to part-time and have a reduction in salary or something for normal retirement. What exactly is the incentive and what do we get back for that incentive?
Well, there's typically I don't think there's a reduction. The reduction in hours is that they leave their keys and right, they're done.
Right, so can you explain to me generally what a retirement incentive is?
Sure. I'd prefer to read it from the policy, so let me see if I can find one of our benefit sheets to do just that.
You probably have, Brenda, if you have an administrative contract, you have the benefits sheet associated with that. Like 1.14% of the salary times the number of years,
Along those lines, I don't want to be
Because
misquoted
usually
on it.
there's some
Yeah.
criteria, you have to have been an employee for 10 or
Correct.
more years, and then you plan to retire within 1 to 2 years, and this is your incentive to please retire early.
Retirement sick leave redemption,
no, it'd be,
early retirement incentive.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, where's that at?
Administrators with at least 11 years of service in the SAU or district that compromises SAU who are at least 55 years of age and who are eligible for early or normal retirement under the New Hampshire retirement system shall be eligible for the following early retirement incentive program equal to the Timberlane Regional School District's benefit for professional employees. Currently is as follows. Submit written notice to the board no later than January 1. Effective January 1, 2006, the retirement incentive shall be 1 1/2% of the employee's last salary times the number of years immediately prior to retirement that the employee served the SAU or district that comprise the SAU in a full-time position. However, in no event shall the amount paid to an employee exceed 45% of the employee's last salary. It was 1.5% times number of years immediately prior to retirement.
So you got 25,000 on 120, that seems more than 1.5%?
Multiply by number of years.
By number of years. Okay, how long was that employee? And I think that's you, right?
That wasn't.
That's not me.
No,
Oh,
no,
no,
I'm still here.
okay, it's a different employee. Okay.
Despite,
previous business administrator.
Ah, so he retired.
Yes, and that's what we
Now
paid
I
out.
get it. Okay.
He retired and that was what we,
That was the
the cost to us to pay him.
Okay, now
That's
now
not
it's making sense.
Because I was hearing you speak, I think, were you thinking of it as a savings to us?
Yeah, well, usually what happens is you're paying a more senior person to retire so you can hire a more junior person. No?
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I just didn't understand that, now I do. Thank you very much, I appreciate
One
that.
quick question on this. Is this, you were saying you don't think this will be ready, but once the year closes, does this take a bit of time to put together, or? So, because we meet on
Oh, okay.
July 9th.
Then let's take the action to have it for the next meeting for the year end.
July 9th, right?
Able to have
Oh,
that?
that would be great.
July 9th.
Have it ready? Or do you- So
is a
it would
very-
be at July 9th, not a week in advance of July 9th. Let's just be clear about the expectations for the document, right?
Yeah.
So at the July 9th meeting, and that'll be for up to June 30, correct?
Yes, that would be great, because then we'd have the end of the year.
Yeah. I hate to like do May
Yeah, I
31
know,
if
I
we
know,
don't have
I know.
to. It
Yeah,
just
no,
doesn't seem like a
it
lot
makes
of
sense.
information, but.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay. So the next page is, Jen asked the difference between pupil personnel services and student services. Does that answer that question for you?
Yep, and those are both Timberlane positions.
Okay, great. The next,
And did we understand what the other was? There was that whole other column, right? Since we were talking about this.
On the spreadsheet?
Yeah, this spreadsheet. We had asked that last time too.
Yeah.
What
That's
is
for
the,
yeah, that's in here. Because you have new spreadsheets that break out that, or that talk about that other in your packet.
Find out which
well,
one
I'm
that
looking
is.
at the new one you sent out, and it still shows other as a total of 21,000. It says other asterisk asterisk.
Includes periodic 6-year true-up of contract days. In the asterisk underneath, right?
Yeah,
In the
but-
very fine print.
yeah,
Okay. That's for contract. That's what that other is, the 21,000?
Correct.
Okay.
okay. So we're all set on that one?
Yeah, we're good, thanks.
Okay, so, John asked for budget scenario planning, to have the Timberlane budget, the 2020 budget, if we paid 100% of the SAU, the 2020 budget at 76%, and then the 20 TRSD and 76% SAU. John, is this
Yeah,
what
so-
you were looking for, and why don't you explain why you thought this would
Yeah,
be helpful?
so when we were talking about this as a separate budget, but when it all goes forward, it'll all be one district, one budget. So, and I'm familiar with the Timberlane budget, not as much with the SAU budget, and I just wanted to see what it would be as a total cost to the district. So what I asked for was to take the Timberlane budget and then put that, so that's that first column, the current voted budget, 19-20 budget, in that first budget column. And then what would the same year budget, the final voted for this past year that went through, for the SAU at the 100% of that cost? So to merge those in. So if you go down through, at first, there's nothing in those columns until you find something on page 3, tuition reimbursements, the first thing, it shows up in that column, because that's something that's in the SAU budget now. So these are just, both of those budgets merged together by those line items to show where they fall, and you can see the costs out of them. So then, if Timberlane takes the 100% of the SAU cost right now, we just absorb the same positions at 100%, that's what the third column over is.
Can I interrupt you just
Yes.
to clarify? So the third column is basically the current voted Timberlane budget
Yep,
plus the
SAU budget.
current voted SAU budget.
Right. So that line, that single line was taken out, and it was expanded. So that 1.5 million that we pay for the SAU now was a single line in those, in that first one, but now it's been removed as a line, and they've been added in as individual lines.
And that line is on page 4 of 6, under 100,
Yeah.
320.
So if you take that one line out of that, and then you take all those,
I'm just looking at the last sheet, the totals.
yes, yep.
I don't understand how, if you combine column 1 and column 2, you come up with what column 3 says.
You don't.
You don't
No.
combine, yeah.
Column 1 is our current budget.
Yeah.
Column 3 is our budget, assuming we pay all the SAU cost, which, no.
Column one includes the 1.5,
Yeah, column
our
1
76%.
includes, this is, column 1 includes.
And then
our-
if you
yeah.
add the 500,000 that Hampstead pays, you get column 3,
Yeah.
right? The 73,850.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so this is just to show that, like, if we're paying 100%, of the cost, as the SAU is now. So, we just picked it up and moved everything over into Timberlane. We'd be paying 100% of that, and that's what that cost is. And then we have the 76% that we actually pay now. So those last two columns are really for a comparison of what we pay at the 76% amount. So you can look at those bottom lines and look at those comparisons.
Okay, now I'm confused. What's the difference between the first column and the last column? Because I just heard that the first one includes the 76%.
76% of the total SAU budget.
Yeah?
We don't, Timberlane is not assessed. It's shares 76%, but we also roll a portion of our fund balance forward every year, so we don't actually pay the full assessment. We pay something less than that, but it's 76% of that.
Yeah.
For purposes here, we pay 1 million in this particular budget. On page 4, we pay 1,589,325. The total SAU budget is actually 2,106,24. 76% of that total is 1,604,834. So it's a little bit higher because I was looking at the actual budget, not what we actually pay. The actual budget is a little higher than we actually pay.
The difference is only like 16,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't much. And you could even
It's just
look at
whatever's
that.
left over is rolled forward to the
Yeah.
next year.
Okay, all right.
It's not entirely
So
clear,
this is budget versus actual.
basically. What our budget versus our contribution.
Okay.
Because this is based off of what will
Our
be for
assessment.
next year's budgets, not this year's budget. So it's next year's, there's no actuals to go against it either. So
Okay.
it's just what was voted on this past March. So just so you can
basically,
look.
yeah, so the SAU budget, the column 2 is what we have on the spreadsheet that we've been looking at. And then what we came up with in the purple line is basically column 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the 76%, right? That's how we made our projections on that purple column, is we did about 75% of some of those items. And so that's what Jeff has done here for us. And then he's just added it in, so.
I've peppered that amount through the lines as the Timberlane budget is structured currently, with the exception, some of the lines we don't actually have in place right now.
Right.
So I've had to add accounts to handle those.
Right, yeah.
But things like the student transportation, we would be using just the TRSD one? And,
There is no student transportation.
well,
That's why it's 0 under the SAU.
The SAU
Oh,
doesn't
oh, I
have a
see. I
transportation
See
see.
column
budget.
2, it's completely
All right.
0.
all right.
Yeah, so it's this thing blown up to
Okay.
include everything with TRSD.
So here, side by side, you can see the Timberlane and then also the SAU costs expanded, as opposed to, right now, if you look at the Timberlane budget, you see a one line.
Yeah, I like this. This is nice.
So this expands it. I did have some questions, though. There were
Helpful for
some.
me to see
Now
what
that the rest of us
you've
are
been
on board with
saying this
Jeff.
and
Yeah.
saying it, but I couldn't
Yeah.
see it. So this
Well-
is good to actually see what you're trying to say.
And in terms of what, before you start, I've said this, and you and I talked about trying to speak the same language and look at this in one common, I don't want to say format or whatever, but we have a budget that lists all the SAU-related expenses on its own schedule. And this lists it as part of that consolidated budget. If the SAU went away, these lines would just become part of Timberlane's, and that's exactly what you see here. So it is a nice format, because that's,
Yeah.
so if you were to look at this and say, well, if we wanted to present this to the voters or as part of our withdrawal plan, your difference would be in these columns, and it would really be the difference between what you're paying, what we're paying now, and what those turned out to be. So I like the common language.
Yeah.
John, you had some questions?
Yeah, so there were some lines that I think you said you had to create.
I did.
Okay, because that's what so like, there was a 23, 21, 111 that was just said superintendent.
Correct.
So that was one of them. It had just a large
Sorry,
number.
what
I
line
couldn't.
was that?
23, 21,
Page
111.
4 of 6.
Thank you.
It's this,
Right in the middle of the page, there's a
Okay, yep.
23, and it was just superintendent. It was like 314,000 at 100%. So I didn't know how to relate that to the current budget to figure out where that came from, but I didn't realize you had to create lines in there as well, because these had line numbers.
Correct.
So I thought these would just kind of come over.
So if you think of the budget in a broader sense, that's why I've subtotaled under the major functional lines. The 2300s have subtotaled, 2400s have subtotaled. SAU services, a lot of those SAU services are captured under that 2320 line for state reporting purposes. And when you break it out and actually incorporate it as part of your budget, a lot of those lines just get picked up right under that 2320, so be, 2320, 21, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where those are included. So superintendent would be the superintendent, assistant superintendent.
Yeah, so this is my difficulty. When I was trying to do this on my own, I didn't know how those would be broken out and absorbed into this budget because the lines would change.
And we didn't have a line for superintendent, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So things would change. If I took that one line out, that was, how do I merge all that in there? So that became a little difficult. I was starting to look at that and say, where does this actually go in our budget? Does it correlate equally over? So this is, for me, to be able to look at it, because, if withdrawal goes forward, this is what you're gonna end up seeing as a budget.
Right, yeah.
All of this merged into one, and this is what the voters will end up voting on every year. And then, so there, I assume, because I asked for no,
Nothing, no changes, nothing.
no changes, so in here is still the audit cost that was in there.
Yep.
So there's still those
Right.
audit things that we can still decrease. So if we've got a $500,000 difference, we might be able to bring that down a little bit just by looking at those lines that just carried over.
This is kind of worst case if we kept all the
Yeah.
staff.
Yeah,
Okay.
This is I don't want to say a starting place, but this is just where those costs would be if they were in the current budget.
Right.
And then from there to go in and say, well, we don't think this is going to be that much or whatever.
Yeah.
Very easy to do.
Jen?
I feel like we've belabored this, but I'm gonna ask again because of how this is put in here. On page 4, the office rental, the 2394.51 line, 42,250.
I
So that is actually,
100%.
So we asked no supposition on anything.
Yep.
Just merge the budgets.
just tell me where it would go, basically.
Right. So we wouldn't be renting the office to ourselves, so that 42,000 would go away. But,
If it were to be in the budget, that's where it would be.
right.
so it's
and-
like, so it's basically a $10,000 loss of revenue from Hampstead.
Which this budget does not show revenue. This is
Right.
just a budget,
So there would also have to be,
a loss of revenue.
that less revenue to offset.
Yeah.
But, when we look at it, that line we probably wouldn't even need that office rental line
Right.
in the budget. So we could remove that, we just have to reflect that revenue line as being, again, you still have that revenue that you have to adjust for,
Yeah,
because it was offsetting that cost before.
Okay.
okay. All right, so moving on, the next.
So just so I understand, I'm a little slow on the uptake. So we're looking at the last page, and we've got the 3 columns with 73 million in them. And the middle column is the one that we would be saying to voters is a possible amount that we would have to pay. So we're looking at like an extra 325,000.
That's assuming no changes.
Assuming no
exactly as
changes.
is. We absorb everything status quo.
It's actually
Correct.
It's actually
500,000.
500.
500,000.
It
Okay,
is-
oh, yeah, it
It
helps if
assumes
it's, I
Hampstead
need to
goes
go back to
away,
math.
and so does Hampstead's
I'm not on the
$500,000.
budget.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so basically it's minus the Hampstead's piece, okay.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
minus anything that we feel that, like we've discussed before, that rental piece, we could take that line out, we'd just lose some offsetting revenue.
Yeah, so
The
there's,
legal line, if we choose to, I didn't even look, was legal the same line, or are they two separate lines in there? Did that add into the,
I believe they were in the same, I probably put in the same. column.
right, so the legal that we had in there added to the Timberlane legal line, it increased that line.
Yep.
Can we go back to this shared service contract? So what budget line, is this built into one budget line or multiple budget lines?
It is multiple budget lines because, and that's the shared services.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I'm not talking about the transportation ones.
Oh, okay.
Dues and fees, stuff like that.
And this budget is a very high level.
So,
If you looked at the break.
so what I'm trying to ask is, these likely cost savings, are these reflected in this or no?
No,
No,
Okay.
nothing's, that budget right there doesn't change anything.
Right.
So whatever cost savings or whatever would have to
Okay.
We would have to
Yep.
adjust this
Yeah.
once we understood all those cost savings, then we could
Yep.
look at adjusting it. But some of it's supposition right now, because we don't know.
Yeah.
Trying to think ahead what our work ahead of us is.
Yeah. So I think right now, some of those things that we already talked about reducing, we can now reduce those lines and see them, how they reflect at the bottom line budget for Timberlane, if it came through.
And do we have this in an online format so it's easy to do?
I think that we only have this in a PDF right now.
Would you like it in, like, Excel?
That would be great.
Yeah, I would like to, any budget type of documents
I
could go into Excel would be.
And I know that you're on the budget committee, and I will say that the spreadsheet that I have here does have formulas in it, so it's a lot easier when you make a change, it just picks it up naturally. The budget reports that the system actually spits out don't.
Right.
So I generated some of this from our system, but I had to go in and add the formulas, so I feel much better about putting something out with formulas for general use and manipulation. Whereas our general system reports don't have formulas. This does, so it's actually pretty handy.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to put it out there. Some of these accounts I've had to add, I've taken liberties with. What, if this were to go through, what that would look like ultimately, or how those get put in place by whoever's doing it at that time. I have no idea what that's gonna look like, but I've taken a best guess. There are a number of places that certain of these expenses
This will
can be-
certainly make it easier for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even the final voted budgets are in PDF format on the website. So
And I put them out, and I don't have, the ones
Right.
that come up from the system have no formulas.
Right,
It is
so-
true WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. It's rather annoying.
That one in a while, whizzy.
It is. It is
Kathy
exactly
has
that.
one. Okay.
I just have a logistical question about the Excel spreadsheet, and that is, are you going to designate there to be a keeper of that particular file? Because if all the committee members get an Excel spreadsheet and they all start playing with the spreadsheet and we have lots of spreadsheets going around, I'm all about logistics, and I'm thinking, if you designate a certain person to handle that with input going to that person so that they can manipulate that one Excel spreadsheet, so we're all working off the
So
same
that would
one.
be
I would,
John and Karen.
I would say anything
So-
that is posted on the site it can't be, I don't want to be able to update, so if Jeff provides an Excel sheet and it's on the site,
Well, the
That
Excel
doesn't- that can't
spreadsheet
be
wouldn't go on the
changed.
site, it would only be a PDF at that point. This was, because the whole purpose of this would be for the committee to start manipulating
Right.
those numbers. And it's just a matter of how you control it, so that at the end of the day, you can validate the
Yeah.
information is still good if everyone has
change control.
lost the formula or something. We just need a keeper of it, that's all I'm thinking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree. So, and Karen and John are the ones doing the fiscal analysis, so they would be the keeper of that. I mean, you can send it, you can send it to everybody. It doesn't, I don't care if if you send it to me as a PDF, I can convert it anyway, so,
there's,
But
yeah,
without
they
the
don't always
formulas.
convert well.
I know, but.
But
this
there's
is
only
not-
going to be one source that you'll be getting it
But
from.
you're the source that will send it to me, so
That's fine.
that will be how it's working. I don't think, if anybody else is manipulating it, I'm gonna use, well,
And you can turn on version
and we'll
control,
make
right?
sure. And I don't even,
So Excel version 2, just the two of them, is that what you want to
yeah,
do?
you can
And,
do that, that's
okay.
fine. This is not something that we would probably include anyway in the,
In the plan.
Right.
No,
This
I've
is
never
just
seen anything
understanding.
like this. This
This
would-
is impact.
yeah, this is
This is really
impact.
a document, as
Yeah.
it's a draft for discussion only, which I'm glad you added that.
Yeah, this
But
is
it
not,
really is to adjust what's the impact. And
Right.
it goes towards that impact for,
It's our work.
I would just suggest that we not state it as a single number, we give a range of numbers, just say, the impact will be somewhere in this range. Because it's you'll never be right with just a single number,
yeah,
right?
and I don't think it's gonna be an exact,
yeah.
you know,
It is-
$523,671.
Exactly, but if we could give a range, say somewhere in this range is what the impact's gonna be, is that fair?
Well, in the withdrawals, what I've seen is that they'll say this is our estimated
Yep.
Yeah,
cost, this is our estimated savings. We do need to give a number. We can't say, it could be between 250 and 300 that we're gonna
Yeah.
cost us. No, we're gonna give a number. We're gonna say, this is an estimated number,
Yep.
this is our best,
Or an approximate,
an
this is,
approximate estimate. Yeah, you can't, we're not gonna give a range. That's, we can't
it's
do
even,
that.
even a range could, I mean, we have a lot of information, and I think that we will be able to give a pretty good approximation.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is the same sort of thing that you do in budgeting anyway. You're kind of giving an approximation, because somebody could change and it could throw
Yeah.
all the numbers.
And
Out of whack.
this document is based off of what we just, the voters just pushed forward.
Okay.
It doesn't take into any cost increases, so we'd have to take this and say, okay, what do we estimate? You know,
Right.
by withdrawal, what would the cost be as well? The Timberland budget's gonna go up, most likely from that
Yeah, we know what the
point as
trend's
well.
been, right?
Yeah, so there'll be increases along the board, just from contractual increases and things like that, so, we'll have to kind of estimate that number.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, the next two sheets are just, I think we've already discussed them. They're just breaking out and more information on the others, parts of the salaries. So I think that hopefully clears up all those questions, right? Good, moving on. The next thing in the packet is the draft of the plan. Karen, Barbara, and I have been working on this. We do have a Google Doc that we work on this, and you'll see there are yellow parts in here because we're still working on this, and I know Karen and John have some information, so I don't want to go over this word by word. If you have changes that you want made to the text or whatever, I guess send them to me, and then we can go through it, but I just want to walk people through it and point out areas that the three of us at least thought that there needs to be some changes, so.
Could I just say thank you,
Yeah.
Mrs. Belcher, for adding the draft to the document? That was very
Yes,
helpful.
Yes.
You're welcome.
And if do we need anything else? Do you have any other questions?
Do you think, I don't think we're gonna need Jeff again, other than,
Very much.
thank you. One thing that we will need, and this is later in the agenda, and it will pertain to you, Jeff, because I would imagine, that you're gonna
Oh, we need calendars.
need to be available, is we're gonna need the availability of Jeff and the superintendent. When are we looking at the public hearing? For the public hearing, which we were shooting the week of August 12th. So we will be, I'm not pinning you down on it now, but we'll talk about it later, so.
Do we have the timeline?
We have the timeline. We're looking at the public hearing the week of August 12th. So I think we need to make sure we have the correct people
did
available.
Kind
Yeah,
of
yep.
translated
Yeah.
into,
It's on
something
the
that
back of
might
the
go
other
into the
blue
plan.
sheet, so.
So we've figured, so right now, are we trying to get to the next meeting, or are we right now trying to determine when the next meetings are?
No, I'm just letting Jeff know that we're looking at the week of, are looking at a public hearing the week of August 12th.
And
Potential, the 12th or the 19th. We had the week of the 12th down. No later than the week of the 19th, because if we have to submit the plan by 2 September, we have to have time to make any changes before. So we could not go later than the week of the 19th. So we're going to be requesting availability of the superintendent and the business administrator.
for the
just
public hearing?
For the public hearing.
Okay, so, and then we'll determine the date based on availability?
Yeah,
All right.
Okay.
so that we can notice so that's,
That makes sense.
just kind of give me a heads up there.
All right. Will you need that tonight?
No, not tonight, but it's, before you left, I wanted to give you a heads up on it. Okay, so, and thanks for coming and the information, I know this is added. I think should be almost to the end of that. Okay, so the first couple pages, just goes into history, then we give the district overviews, the overview of the SAU, on page 5, Karen and John, we need a table of the SAU55 and budgeted assessments for the last 5 to 10 years.
so I did this. I didn't know how much detail you wanted. So this is what I wanted, feedback from the committee. So what I provided, and it says page 6 on it. I guess on this version it's page 5, apologies. So I just provided 3 lines, the SAU salaries, the SAU operating expenses, and then the total SAU budget over the last 10 years. And I put it into a chart. But I wanted input from the committee as to what level of detail you'd like. Clearly, I can provide more detail.
The chart, I was looking for more detail, and I'm trying to, and I can send you this after if I can't find it. I was looking for a table that was similar to something that someone else had done.
Assessment by town, by district?
No, not even assess, oh,
Because we've got this one too, right? The one with the bubbles that we already talked about.
I think
And that has more line
one's-
items.
That,
and I
that one's
can-
the one that goes later in terms of costing.
I
What,
think we do need to include district assessments
okay,
in there.
what I can send you this. I'm looking for, I think this is what we're talking about, this chart right here. This is SAU 43
Yes.
district assessments by
Yes.
town.
Okay, so you want it separated out by
Not by
town?
town.
Oh, by sorry,
district.
By district.
District.
These guys were doing it by town, so
Okay.
can you just pass that down? And I can send you that.
That'd be great. I'll take a quick picture now. Again, I wasn't 100% sure what you were looking for, and I knew that
Sorry,
something
that
like
was-
this would
that
be
was my fault.
overwhelming.
I think there was in, all the SAU withdrawal plans I've looked at have something kind of similar.
I think that one, Karen, has two towns because each town is its own district. So in our case, it would be Timberlane, Hampstead,
Okay.
instead of Croydon, Newport, or whatever it is there.
Well, how would that look? I'm just thinking it might start getting a little more complex.
No, it's only gonna be two towns.
towns.
Two town.
This.
So, and I've got that
Timberlane,
data
Hampstead.
here, so,
Oh, I
you know,
see,
what
okay.
Hampstead and what Timberlane have paid over time.
Yeah,
So
like
I can
this.
just,
so it's something simple like that.
okay, yeah, I'll put that together for you.
The more detailed budget can go into the appendix, like our current budget.
I think this is, this is good.
I
We
like
just want to add a
this.
little bit to it, right?
Oh, yeah, I'd keep that,
Yeah.
I like figures, yeah, I'd
Yeah.
keep that in there,
Charts,
but we
pre-charts.
also, with charts.
Okay.
So- But I'd also add this table.
Sure. We'll do-
Okay, so if we could put that in there, we'll give you, oh, you have
I can
access.
just add the two lines to the bottom of this. What Timberlane and what Hampstead have paid over time. Is that what you're looking for?
Well, just an
Yeah.
extra table with
Yeah,
the
but-
breakout by district.
Yeah, but you can't just add two lines, well.
Yeah, it wouldn't be two lines, it'd be a separate table because it's a different deal.
Well, you understand what we need, so.
Yep.
How
Thanks,
brave
Karen.
of you.
I'll take it back.
No more than 5 colors.
I know, I'm gonna reduce the colors. I know
like the-
things
I
have to
like
be
the colors.
printed in
I
black
like
and
the
I've been
white.
thinking about you in those colors all night.
Okay, all right, moving on. Okay.
Crayons.
I like
So
the
we're on
colors.
page 5. The withdrawal committee met from May 1 to, that's an open date because we don't know when we're going to stop meeting. Oh, hopefully soon.
Not that we don't like you.
Close to 10 o'clock. No, it's that late last night. Okay.
Feels it.
Then, page 6, instead of pros and cons, we move to, under documents, I'm gonna rework that section a little. I do wanna have just, a narrative there that points to the appendix about all, and I really want that for other people that are going through a withdrawal that might pull this up to say, what was it you guys did and looked at? So that's.
What was your work product?
Yeah, how did you go about it? So, plus I think it's good for people to see that this is some of the background documents that are in there. Then there's a long table, that still has open questions that compares the current SAU to a single district SAU. So that table goes on for like 2 pages.
I think going back to your comment though, speaks to what I think, John, you brought up, moving away from saying pros and cons versus
Is a benefit, what's the benefit of,
looking at how does a
Yeah,
single
what's the
district SAU compare to a multi-district SAU? And so that's what this, and I did try and like clean it up a little bit, so it's an easy crosswalk from one to the other, like
Yeah.
a comparison that's, makes sense.
yeah, so if you look at, if you're looking at it as a positive, what's the positives for staying in and the positives for leaving?
Yeah,
as
it's
opposed
not
to
even
pro
listed
and
here
con
as
type
like
of thing.
positives or.
I know,
It's
but
not.
we were talking about that and staying, if you just, it's not, a
Differences.
yeah.
Okay,
the
so-
differences.
so-
We're not gonna value it, yeah.
What's your thought on this table?
Like it.
You like it?
I like
Okay.
it.
Yes.
The one thing I did want to add is where you're talking about the different board members is, I think it would be nice if we could add in a level of detail for like the amount of time. Like, do you guys meet for the school board every week?
Every other.
Every other
Or
week?
twice a month. Well,
Okay, so twice a
actually,
month,
Karen,
but-
that's
and
really
she
hard
can't
to,
even-
So
I
that many
can't.
hours, and then, because now you also have to meet on the SAU board in addition to Timberlane, and now you're here on this committee. I don't think the public knows how much you guys as volunteers
Right.
on these boards. you
I can
took
tell
on.
you for the last, maybe 2 months, it's been, and poor Kathy can speak to this,
It's
it's been like at least 2 meetings
I think there's
2
been
meetings a week.
16 meetings since May 15th.
Oh, my God.
Between the
I just counted
meetings,
them
the
on my
work
desk.
sessions, the hearings,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
committee work.
unbelievable.
So I think you should document that. I
Okay,
think
I'll-
people realize
we'll
that.
add, we'll add
can't.
something in.
If it's-
We'll add
it's
But you
not
did
in
mention in
staff
there
and-
somewhere that it turns people away from wanting to run for the school board.
I think we pulled that out, that was too, I don't,
But it's true. I mean, it's hard to find people to do this.
well, we'll put something in there.
I want to give you credit, okay?
We won't spend any more time on it, though, right now.
Moving
Time
on.
requirements, okay, we'll add that into the table somehow,
Including this time?
including this time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know, it's,
Definitely.
okay, so our recommendation is a single district SAU, and I think this, I used Monadnock's format. So I went through and made sure that we tried to hit all the RSA requirements here. Educational impact on students, cost to the school district, cost of health insurance, that looks like it's a net neutral based on what Jeff just gave us, so I will fix that section. Moving on to page 9. The impact on the withdrawing district. What did we decide on the
We had-
transportation thing? I was gonna write in a
So
line here saying
yeah.
that currently there are savings in transportation and there may be
They may not recognize these savings in the future.
savings in okay, so that can go in there. Down at the bottom, it says, maybe add in here some excerpt from the letter Hampstead gave the committee. Which letter? The letter that just says that they'll weigh in after the public hearing?
I didn't know if we wanted to put some kind of, I
Yes.
mean, it's a document that we received.
We attempted to communicate.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna put that in and it will be referenced in the appendix, so.
Looked, we asked, they were non-responsive, we're trying to take this into account, this is what we received.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, we'll put that in. The only assets are the general fund balance, including pension obligation. Was that you that put that less than 200,000? Who put
I
that
did.
in? Sorry, why is it in yellow? Are you?
Because I didn't know how much it was, how much
Oh,
we
the
have in the
pension
general.
obligation.
Yeah. And I assume we'd have to split that up.
You know what, I think that's a lawyer question. I don't know.
I mean,
Because
if we're paying in for pensions and everybody's been contributing, so we
I have
need to.
not seen that addressed in others' withdrawal studies.
We have
Well,
so
that's
few
a very good
assets,
idea.
that's about it, that and the fingerprint machine.
I'm gonna, that's a legal question, I think. And, I may as well, I mentioned the word lawyer, so let me, I did, I'll bring it up now. I did contact the lawyer to let her know things are moving along and ask if she was available on July 9th. She is available? Does the committee want her here? I told her to hold that date open. I did ask her if it's typical for the lawyer to be at the public hearing, and she said no, but if we wanted her there, she would come once, if she's available when we set the date. So if that's not a common practice, frankly, don't like to spend money. I don't think we'll have her at the public hearing unless this committee decides otherwise. John?
Has she ever dealt with a withdrawal before?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so
Oh, yeah.
that, I think that would offer us some,
So you'd like to hear on the 9th?
unfortunately, I can't, I'll be phoning in on the 9th.
Oh, okay, but.
I will be phoning in, but I will be away for work, but that week, but
Okay.
I will dial in.
So people will like her here on the 9th? She
Where-
has, just so you're aware of it, because I actually just reviewed the bill. I think we've incurred costs of about $1,700 to date. I think that's the only bill. There was an initial conversation with the Timberlane chair, who I now have the authority to speak for Timberlane to the lawyer. So I've spoken to her. She's spoken to Richard Sala, who's a lawyer up at the Department of Education. She's been in contact with the Department of Education. Hampstead has legal counsel. She's been in contact with them. She has been looking at the website, so I think she sees. I have not asked her to have a formal read on the plan yet. My hope is that in the next 2 weeks, we tighten this up, because it's coming very close to, I think, what we're gonna, and I ask her to do a formal read to say, what, is this acceptable, or what are we missing? Before July 9th.
And I have questions about the process. We have to recommend, make a recommendation.
We haven't actually voted on that yet.
When are we actually supposed to do that? Do we do that at public hearing? Do we move it forward with that? Do we have to do that before the public hearing? Or before submission to the Board of Ed, or, so it's really
What's the
just,
timeframe?
I want to make sure that we're doing our diligence and
Okay.
doing per RSA when we're supposed to be doing. I know we have the timeline, but there's certain pieces that, like the
Yep.
vote.
Right.
And I don't want something to come after and say, well, you didn't do this before the public hearing, so now you have to have a second public hearing.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we don't have to incur additional costs, because there's a cost with a public hearing.
Yeah,
And
okay,
so we
no,
had that with
a
the
great
budget
point.
committee a few years ago.
Right.
Or last year, because we had to have several meetings
Would it
because
be
of
helpful
warrants.
for us to all to forward our questions?
Yes.
To you, and then you can feed them to her and
Why
have
don't
her
you do
come on
that?
the 9th?
Okay.
Forward all your questions to me so that she'll be prepared on the 9th. We'll also ask her to review this document, which will be worked on between now and then.
How did you come about selecting her or find her for her expertise?
She was found through Timberland's legal counsel, current legal counsel,
Okay,
recommended.
good.
So should we just ask for a letter that responds to our questions? I'm not sure how much more it costs to have her interactive here, and,
Much more.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
I
yeah.
mean, why, do we really need to have her here?
Yes.
You want her here? I'm,
I feel like,
sometimes it's almost, it can be more costly even to put a letter together than to just have the
but
questions.
I just think, because if there's any back and forth or any questions that come up from the answers, it's easier
Right.
to have.
To get
A
it done in real
dialogue.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm allergic to spending money.
I know, but as John says, it's better to spend the money on a
Front end,
lawyer
yeah.
here.
Then the back
Absolutely.
end.
Yeah, exactly.
They're on the front
I
end.
wish we'd asked her.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, I'll plan to have her on the 9th, but gather your questions beforehand, so that way if it's something,
Yeah.
and I won't ask, I'm gonna tell her, don't write out a formal response, but be prepared to answer these questions.
Right, and so since you brought up the subject, do we have enough information to make a recommendation at this point? Should we make a motion about how the board feels, or should we wait?
Well, I think we should wait till the 9th, because we'll be in better shape and there's no reason to rush into the recommendation yet.
Okay.
We don't even have all the numbers, and I'm hoping that we get
I'd like to
some
have
of
the plan.
software stuff and.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much done. Okay, so we're on page 9, moving on, and I have a question to ask the lawyer about this obligation. Okay, then we need the plan for providing superintendent services. That's on page 10. Jen did an enormous amount
Just
of
going
work.
back to page 9, if
Yeah.
I may real fast, onboarding of new personnel prior to formation of new SAU. Yeah,
Where are
obviously
you?
that's.
At the bottom of the page,
Bottom of
second
page
bullet
9,
from the
second to
bottom.
last.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we've spoken about this before. How and where would it be appropriate to reflect that in the budget for the extra, 3-month overlay, as it were?
I
Or
don't-
potential
I
overlap?
don't
Or would it
think
be
you-
appropriate?
No.
I mean, because that's
No.
an additional expense, no?
You'd put it in as a transition cost, one-time
One-time
expense.
expense.
You wouldn't
Okay,
put
so
it
that's
into the
where it put
budget.
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we do want to list that somewhere as a one.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah, well,
probably
we-
just have a statement of like one-time expense for whatever.
One-time expense, and we're gonna have to come up with some number for that
what we think that
person,
would be.
and, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was recommended to me, like, that you at least have the transition of the superintendent coming on board.
Yeah, I put that in here.
Right, so I mean, that was But there is some kind of a cost.
Right, a new superintendent, 1 to 2 administrative personnel in place 3 months prior.
Right. So there'll just have to be a cost associated for a few months in the previous year's budget.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering where
No,
that
no,
would
no,
reflect.
You don't want to reflect it in the budget. You want to reflect it as a one-time expense
But
of the
it
transition.
has to be paid out of somewhere, right?
It does. I'm
Right.
not saying that it doesn't, but you don't want to reflect it in what the new, you're not reflecting it in the old SAU budget, and you're not reflecting it in your new proposed SAU budget, because it's a one-time expense. Because
Right.
what you're doing is proposing a new budget based off the old budget, and you don't want to throw in the one-time expense to that budget.
You know, we can't add it into the vote
The voters have to
to
vote on it.
withdrawal because there's specific wording, right? You can't add a cost into
No,
that.
the
Well, we can
cost-
do a contingent warrant article saying if this one passes, then this is,
Yeah, it could be a warrant article that goes through, but then you can't
Um,
because the voters could turn it down and you wouldn't
No,
have
no,
any
no.
cost.
If we go with what is being proposed here as a transition year, you've got the year to plan it into the budget.
Okay,
You have the time to put it in the budget.
yeah.
all right,
to
so,
put
so it would
to
be
put
the
in
following
budget.
year, it would be part of the budget, which is, I think, what you guys are saying, right?
That's all I was saying. It would be part of a budget at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
It would be
You wouldn't-
included as an overlap time
Right.
in a budget.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
wouldn't be
Does,
in.
does
yeah.
that help?
Not really.
You're
I-
gonna still say in here that there's a cost, but you don't wanna put it in the proposed budget, cause it's a one-time expense cost.
It's not a rolling forward,
not
this is what the
rolling
future will
forward.
look
But we
like.
still need to
Oh, no,
state it
understood.
next
I
to
mean,
it.
so, but we're talking about, not nickel and diming, but different fees for first student or frontline technologies as to what the cost or potential savings would be initially, and acknowledging there could be some initial cost and or pro-con benefit financially. And if we're going to be having that overlap 3 months from the old budget or new budget, there's going to be additional cost upfront for the transition for our community taxpayers. That, I agree, it is one time. Where is it best to reflect that? That's what I'm asking. I honestly don't know the answer. That's,
It's reflected in the document where it says
One time.
one-time cost under that
and
heading.
it'll just be a one-liner.
Yeah,
Well, it's his section right here, transition plan, right?
yeah.
No, it would, I wouldn't, I,
That's
you
what I'm,
could
that's what I'm
mention it
asking.
here,
Okay.
but this is not the fiscal analysis. It would go in the fiscal analysis section.
And it would be clearly labeled,
It would be clearly
transition
labeled,
cost.
yeah, that there
Okay.
was, what that cost was.
Yeah, I mean, we should have the potential savings as well. We're talking about the assistant vice and it not concentrating. I know that's going to be baked in there. And that will be an upfront savings that we will recognize, from month, 3 on. I just want to make certain that we encapsulate all of this. Does that make sense?
We will, yeah, and if we don't, I mean, you're certainly welcome to do that part if you want. The budget part, and to make sure it all gets encapsulated.
I'm just trying to make certain that everything is reflected. That's all. And I didn't know where the appropriate place for that to be seen to create visibility for it.
Okay,
Because
so,
we don't have the budget pieces worked
don't
in
have the
here
budget
right yet,
pieces in there
so,
yet.
and this is, it's gonna be added in, so are there,
I did not see that added in.
well, no,
just wondering what
these
it
are
would be.
literally
Yeah.
the things that are being added in, right?
there's no budgetary stuff added in yet.
Right, well, this is slotted to go in on page 16, right?
Right, so, yeah.
And-
Fair
and
point.
we
I mean,
don't-
so would it,
It wouldn't go in that budget.
But there would be another page that would say transition cost, right?
Right.
okay.
So,
Yeah.
but we don't have it yet, y'all are gonna have it, all right.
Yeah. Or,
That answers the question.
yeah, it'll be in there. And I mean, if you wanna do that section, you're welcome to do it. I don't have to do this.
How many colors can I use?
I only got 3, 'cause
Well, I'll go with one.
What color is left?
You have black
it
and
should be a
gray.
very short, if you wanna just draft it and send it to me, then I'll put it in the fiscal section.
I'm certainly not suggesting more facile with working the budget than you are. I was
I'm not
asking a
wor-
genuine question, where would
I'm
that
not
be?
working the budget.
So we've got agreement. We're going to have a transition page.
We'll have a
with
transition
costs.
page.
It will
Okay.
in the fiscal analysis. All right.
Did we
Okay.
get an answer on, when I listed out the staff?
Okay, we're just staffing now. We haven't talked, we're
Oh,
on
sorry.
page 10.
That is page 10.
We just started page 10.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
this
man, there's
is,
something
this is Jen has listed positions. Now, I know we had this conversation earlier about, well, the superintendent gave us this and it kind of mixed. The reason that this is put in here this way is we have to ensure by RSA that we're covering all the services. So why Jen is listing all the current positions is so that in the next section, and this is not to jump too far ahead, but on page 13, she's showing how these services are gonna be provided in the single district, SAU. 'Cause
So they
some-
map to the positions back on pages 10 and 11?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
To map to
Pages
the
10 and
RSA.
11 is what we currently have. And did the superintendent get back to you about, so when I looked at the SAU website, we have an associate principal and director of high school alternative continuing ed and enrichment listed as SAU operations and transportation.
Yeah, I think that's an error.
So
I-
just strike that.
I asked about that, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was an error, but I didn't want to assume. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So,
And then when I didn't see it on here, I was like, oh, okay.
so 10 and 11 maps onto 13 and 14 to show how our current staffing satisfies the requirements for RSA.
Could I make a comment about page 12? Because
Yeah.
Barbara had asked about these lighter things in green here. Some of these green items, like facilities director, well, that's not a good example. Student services coordinator, that's a Timberlane position that we currently have. So I didn't really want to, when the four of us kind of met as a subcommittee, a bigger, whatever you want to call us, we were talking about what that would look like, what kind of positions we would have to still have to meet the required services of the superintendent. And that's somewhat what we looked at, but, sorry, I'm a little distracted tonight. But I don't think putting it in here for an SAU plan is really the right place for it, because then you're mixing Timberlane positions with SAU positions, and it gets a little sloppy. But I didn't want to not put it in there because it was a discussion that we had had.
Well, part of it was, what is the role of the assistant superintendent? And, you know, when you look at what they do, a lot of times they are director of curriculum,
Yes.
but we already have that position, so it's almost like it's, you know, these are the functions of the assistant superintendent, and these are the. So we started getting into that conversation of, you know, and then we're like, okay, you know, who's in
Well, I
that
think an
spot?
accurate way to reflect that is more, I think we had kind of talked about a little bit, is through the budgeting process. So, yes, we would have an assistant superintendent, but that there may not be a cost associated with that, because those services would be provided through the current Timberlane structure.
So one of the things I did, again, back to this bubble thingy, right? My second bullet in the blue bubble under fiscal analysis says cost of assistant superintendent stays in TRSD budget.
Well, it's all gonna be the same budget.
Yeah.
You can't see,
Well, but it helps to understand the difference
Right.
in the cost of the SAU, right?
And, yeah.
So that was a way that I could wrap my head around providing superintendent services, but it's already provided for by TRSD.
but
Yeah.
we felt that we wanted to keep the position of assistant superintendent as a titled position.
So you're changing the label of an existing position in TRSD?
Well, that wouldn't be up for us to decide, but we're saying
But
that's
Gives the
how you're.
flexibility for-
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're saying we already have some of those services being provided for within TRSD. So we don't want to duplicate that
Yeah.
from a financial point of view, but we also don't want to put the impression that we're saying, no, this SAU will not have an assistant superintendent.
So it's saying we got it
Perhaps one with
covered.
a focus in an area that
Right.
perhaps deserves more attention.
You know, when I look at other withdrawal plans, and I look at the bubble sheet, and I look at this, I think, you're gonna kill me here. I think this is too much in detail. I don't see this level of detail in other plans.
Some had it, but some didn't, yeah.
I think, but for ours, I think it's complicated. I think I would take this whole page out, but I would leave
The current,
the
that's the current.
current.
So which
And-
page are we pointing at?
12.
So
Okay.
I'm suggesting we eliminate page 12. We leave the current.
And the current is
No, no,
page
no,
11?
no, it wasn't anything.
And then we leave page 13 to show that we have the structure that's gonna do this, to provide the services. And not, and do something like we talked about before, where Karen, and then all we have is Karen's table saying, our savings here is asterisk, we feel that the executive salaries are going down, that your, people call them charts, I call them tables, that your table has explanation associated with it.
And I can
But not at
format it
this-
the way anybody wants.
But not at this, does it, what do you think about that? I know you spent a lot of time working this through, but I don't, and I love what you did here with this, because it lays out the requirements and it lays out how we're gonna provide them. But I think we're
Have to
gonna,
look at some other plans and think about that. Maybe that's a good question for the attorney.
yeah, because I don't see usually.
What's the best way, what is the best way, and what should we be putting
And what
in?
is DOE looking for?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
if
I
we
mean,
don't, if we don't.
I'm not at
we
all
don't have
offended
this as DOE
by
does
taking
it.
out these wonderful colors I put in here for Mark.
Well.
I'm taking that as a compliment, no matter how you intended it.
Okay.
It looks
so-
nice. I like the colors.
I'm marking this up. I'm gonna, when she goes, I'm not gonna pull this table yet because I want, when she looks at the
That's
draft, I
legal.
want
You
her
can
to
pull it.
see
I've got it in
No,
four
no.
different places.
No, but I want the attorney to see it.
It's not going away.
It's not going away. We also, another thing we're gonna have to do is, this is in Google Docs, and you can see as we pull it into here that we're gonna have some formatting that we're gonna have to play around with, like the bubbles and.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
gonna end up in Word before it goes
It is.
out final.
Yeah, so, and, all right, so, okay, so then we're on page 14. And,
So I just wanted one comment on that last one is we aren't actually making, we're showing a possible feasible plan. We don't have to give an actual plan that anybody's gonna go to, right? We should just make it real clear that this is a potential,
potential
not
structure.
a potential structure, right?
yeah, but I think we're better off not, let's ask the attorney what she thinks.
that's a good
Let's
idea.
leave it up to her, because I think Jen's other tables really show that we are meeting it, and I
Yeah,
think this
this is
opens
great.
us up to, I don't know, okay. So fiscal analysis, Karen and John have been working on that, so if we should talk, so we can figure out how we're gonna, there's gonna have to be some narrative in addition to the
Bubbles.
bubbles.
Yes. That's what I wanted to know, is what other level of detail you wanted, so.
Yeah.
And
maybe-
now that you've got the additional information from Jeff, John, you
Yep.
can weigh in on that.
Yeah, and so like, even in here, we discussed, like in the bubble, we removed the time payout. But, again, I'm not sure if we want to be doing that type of thing. Making decisions on what the policies are gonna be. That's what it is now, but we don't know what negotiated contracts are gonna be, so there's certain things that we might wanna adjust in that.
Well, that's why I like having a range. It's like.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, but you don't, You don't see that in withdrawal, I mean,
Okay,
Yeah.
we can be thought leaders. No,
I
okay.
I kind of like the range too, I have
Yeah.
to say. But then again, I like bubbles and colors, so.
I think
All right.
the range is confusing for the public reading.
Yeah.
If I'm not on this committee and I'm a member of the public and I'm looking, and I go to public hearing, I'm looking at this, I'm like, well, this is, like, could be anything.
But the truth is, we are playing and trying to focus into a range. We don't have any,
But I think
We're
the
not
numbers
ex-
that we're trying to come up with are based in
Best
factual
guesses.
numbers that we have.
okay, well,
okay.
we can mull over the range, and we can look at more withdrawal plans, but I have not seen ranges. And I think it's more for the public than, I agree with you. This should be a range, but for the public, I don't, you gotta give an absolute number for this. I just,
An absolute estimate.
an absolute estimate.
Yeah, that's
You know, it is what it is. Okay, so we'll work on this. Methods of financing, that's just something that has to go in there. It's pretty obvious, there's a typo in there. And then the appendix, I don't know if we're just gonna have appendix and then documents, but that's an easy thing, so.
So I thought you had asked at one point in there, and again, I might have had a different copy. You had asked for a chart of the salaries of the top admin, so I did put that one together. Originally, I thought it was gonna be on like page 6 or something like that. And again, I'm not insulted if you don't want it in or not, but I know that there's been a lot of chatter about, similar size school districts along with salaries. So I don't care if you want to put that one in or not, but I just thought I'd point out
Yep.
that I put that up.
I think
And-
that's important to have, though, when you're talking about this column here.
I do too. I do
Just to be
too.
able to
Yes.
see why we're putting those numbers in there that we're putting in there.
Okay. So when you guys get a chance to take a look at this more in depth and you want to provide me some feedback, I will adjust it or edit it as, and I added in the number of students, which it's got the secondary access over on the right-hand side.
Is there a reason that
So-
we went with 3 instead of 5, or?
Because that's what's available on the DOE website,
Gotcha, okay.
so that I could get that for all the SAUs.
No, I mean, this is salaries of top 3 SAU admins. Oh, from the 10 largest, sorry, got it.
Yeah, so I picked the 10 largest down below, the 10 largest
Okay,
schools.
perfect. I was reading that backwards, thank you.
Okay.
I wonder, I'm just looking because you've got such a, we can talk about this as just a graphing thing. There's such a large difference in student size. I know you're starting both at your right y-axis from 0. I wonder if you started it at 2,000, if it would show a little bit more detail in the lines that are
students?
almost nearly horizontal.
Okay.
Because there's a heck of a difference between administering for 3,000 and 2,000, but it's not necessarily
You
reflected here.
can't see
Yeah, you
it
can't
because,
appreciate it.
because these two, I
Yeah.
was gonna say drop out those two, but you're trying to show the 10 largest SAUs, so you can't drop out those two, so maybe change the right-hand y-axis to start at 2,000,
2,000
and that will
students.
show separation between the,
You could even probably go higher, because
Well,
there's nothing under 4,000.
yeah, 3,000?
3,000.
3,000.
Yeah, 3,000, right?
Okay.
Yeah, you could start at 3,000,
Okay.
just to see how it looks.
Sure. Yeah, no, I just threw these together and was hoping for feedback. Thank you.
It's much better than I could do. Okay, so,
And then we were at the timeline on the top of 15.
yeah, and that's gonna go
So
in there somewhere.
Again, I threw this together. It's on the page opposite of the bubbles and the fiscal analysis.
Yeah,
So again, I'm looking for feedback. I just threw it together. I want something that's easy to read, understandable. What were you guys looking for the timeline?
No, I think this is good, except I take out all the weeks that we didn't have.
Because
any.
there was
It's just-
one I sent you that
Yeah.
had, the timeline had, it was going this way,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
would fit because you don't need all these empty weeks.
Yeah.
But there was one more column here that gave just a little brief
Some
what
more notes.
happened,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay, so you want to add that extra column?
just,
Yeah, and Jen sent it to me, now I can't remember. I have it somewhere.
Oh, if you've got it, do you want to just pull this chart together then? Because I don't have that most up-to-date one. This is my older version
do I
of the
have
time.
what?
You
The
said,
chart that you liked, the chart that you liked.
I'd be happy to send it to you.
Is the mic?
We'll talk
have
after, we'll
colors?
talk, we'll talk.
Okay, so that's
Again,
it. All right.
open for
What else do we-
feedback.
What else do we need to do here? Business discussion. Okay, so we drive,
So the fiscal analysis on page 14, current page 14, we're gonna slot in this, our favorite blue balloon thing.
yeah, that's gonna go in there. We have we have narrative that needs to go in there. We need,
So where's that narrative coming from?
somebody's gotta write it.
Okay, but who?
I think we gotta,
I'll write it.
I think we
Yeah,
gotta,
and I
we
can
gotta
write
do
it.
it first.
We gotta do it first and then we'll write the
Yeah.
narrative.
Because the thing is, I'm willing to put these graphs and things in, but I want to wait until all the words are in, because while we're coordinating on the docs and Google Docs, it's easy to move things around, but once I get these babies in, I have to go to Word, because we can't rotate pages in Google Docs.
Okay, so you want the narrative in. Okay, well, a couple of us then need to talk so we can figure out, and we don't need to do it
And
now.
when we're close to the final wording and getting towards the end of the collaboration, then we can slot in the fancier stuff.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We can leave, we could leave these graphs as, or tables.
Separate documents right now.
As Excel files.
Yeah.
Maybe we combine them all into one Excel file and then that way we can work off
Drop
on
them
it.
in when we get there.
We drop
Just
them in.
Put a little
and
placeholder in.
2018-19 is
And I'll
not
give you the
actual
Word
spend,
document,
it's
Mrs. Belcher.
budgeted, so that's another.
Mrs. Belcher, I'll provide this as a Word document in the end, because that's probably easier for you, right?
To do what with?
For the draft, when you're posting the draft, I mean, before the public hearing.
A Word is fine, a PDF is fine. If you convert it to a PDF, then you've got your document.
Okay.
So if you PDF it, then you'll know that your formatting worked
Yeah.
as well. So
Good point.
sometimes it takes a couple of tries.
I
After you
know.
convert it to a PDF, something doesn't line up right, you go back and you fix it and you go back and forth. So that would be the best.
It
Okay,
saves you
yeah.
some time too, so that's
All right,
awesome.
so provide you with PDFs, okay?
We're also gonna
You can
need,
paginate through the PDF process as well. And you can, that way you can put page numbers on your appendices.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm limited with the current tool, so, but when I go to Word proper, it'll be easier. Okay.
we're gonna need a signature page too, which I
Oh.
don't have on this. So we need a signature page either at the front or at the back. Okay. So we will continue to work on this, I don't even know what day it is, June 19th. And try to get this almost ready by, let's say, the week of July 1, so that the lawyer can look at it before she comes on the 9th. So we'll continue to work on it that way.
Did you be asking her that pension question as well?
Yeah, I wrote
Pension
some
fee ticket,
notes,
perfect.
and other questions, just feed them to me and I'll send them to her, so I'll talk to her. Okay, one other thing in the packet, you have this document that's 3 pages, 3 pages? 2 pages, 3 pages. This was from Sabrina, couldn't make it tonight. Just wanted to let you know.
I don't, I can't really ask.
So it
Did you
almost
talk
seems
to her about this?
redundant to the other bullet points that we were talking about earlier, with the exception of, for example, obtaining the SAU records 55. Do we want to notate that, or no? Because if we're doing away with the pros and cons, I mean, that's certainly a con and a trouble, but I'm not certain that fits in easily with anything that we've
I
done.
don't think it's a con, it's,
It's
I
a
mean,
one-time transition cost, right? To make sure that we divide like,
That's what
Jeff
Jeff
was
said, we're
saying
gonna
is-
get a number on that, what that cost would be. But I don't understand what is decrease in salaries and benefits versus caliber of people we would be recruiting.
I don't know.
I think that, the intention after withdrawal is that we're going to reduce, we're not gonna pay as much money to some of the new SAU employees.
I don't think that's a fair assumption.
Well, I think that was proposed, in some of the earlier versions, that was proposed having the, for example, superintendent be less than what perhaps schools, reflective of the sheet that you had given out, which, with a wonderful graph, as to how much was currently being paid to some of the larger SAUs. In 150, which I think was the proposed, falls below that. I think that may be where she was going with that. Supposition on my part, but that's how I interpret it.
I thought we addressed that, though, a couple meetings ago. We changed that.
I upped it to 150.
I think we
Yeah.
we did. We upped it
normalized
at the
it.
last meeting.
Yeah.
I think that's what this may have been reflecting.
Well, we can discuss it more at the next meeting when she's here. Because I'm not really, I think that's probably what it is, so. Okay, so that's about it. We need to set a public hearing date. So I'm gonna ask Mrs. Belcher to take an action item, sorry. We need to do the public hearing, in my mind, either the week of the 12th or the week of the 19th of August. We're gonna need, I would think, the superintendent and business administrator there, or somebody that can represent those two entities. That would be my guess. I don't know, I'd have to ask the lawyer. But could you find their availability the week of the 12th and the 19th? And if the committee's all right with that?
Maybe on the 9th when we meet, we
On
plan
the
to set that.
9th, we set the date for the public hearing, based on that availability, and then we'll know our availability.
Will we be collecting our availability on the same chart like we did for the first meeting?
Yeah, maybe we should do that, Kathy. Maybe we should have a, no? No.
Because depending on when they're available, we might not need that many dates on the chart.
That's true.
Yeah, like, the number of dates we have to pick from, it's not worth all of us sifting through all these dates if
Yeah.
really they're
If we
combined.
find they're only available,
Right.
So what happens at the public hearing? We're certainly not going to go through and read the 20-page document word for word. Will we put up extra slides? Do we present? Are the superintendent and the business administrator there for questions? Are we there for questions? What's the
well,
format?
I would think it would be the same sort of thing that we do with a public hearing of the budget or something. I can put together a few slides. I'm not gonna go through this document will be available to the public.
We'll put it with the posting, when we put the notices out, we'll put a link to it so people can look at the document prior to the public hearing.
And I'm not gonna present for half an hour. I mean, give a 5 to 10 minute overview and then open up the floor for questions.
Okay.
That's usually how it goes. And,
If we can get the document out early enough, I think that's adequate.
You
To give people time
have
to
to
review,
post
yeah.
it at least 14 days prior to the public hearing. So that's why we're,
Yeah.
And then just
Yeah.
go through the process and make sure that people are clear that, it's not gonna happen in March.
well, I will certainly, yeah, well, I'll do a few slides explaining the process and so on and so forth, yeah.
And
I'll
then
send-
will we have then the proposed warrant article wording as well to help or not?
The warrant article is by statute.
Okay. But that would be something that we could share with the public, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll recognize it when it
Okay.
comes around in March.
Yeah. And the- another
seen it.
question
I'll
for
remember
the,
that from.
another question for the lawyer, and we have a Timberlane board meeting tomorrow, is when does the school board weigh in? And my question to the board is gonna be, do you guys wanna meet before we finalize the document for the public hearing? I don't know. I think I need to,
Well, they would make a recommendation, I would imagine, during the warrant article process.
but not for the public hearing?
I don't know the answer to that, but if it ends up on the ballot, that would be the point at which they would make a recommendation.
Yeah, that's when they take the vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know, they could, maybe one is required, I don't recall reading
Yeah,
that,
I
but
should ask.
it's a legal
Ask
question, I
the
think.
lawyer question.
what's the
Because it's not a school, we're not a school board committee, so.
No, we're not, but the question is, should the school board weigh in on it before the public hearing?
I haven't seen any
I don't think
reference
so.
of any of that with the,
Okay, all right.
doesn't mean we can't.
Right,
One
yeah.
more thing to fit into the timeline, though.
I would think that they would weigh in on it when they weigh in on all the other warrant articles.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
just my opinion.
Yeah, okay. So, do you think we're set to meet on July 9th? We might need one more meeting here before, to wrap it up before the public hearing, which means before it's posted for the public hearing. Which, is that timeline?
I had here, notice of public hearing, the week of July 22nd. And
Right, so
that's if the public hearing is gonna be the week of August 12th.
Right, so we would have time to have another meeting, potentially, if we don't have this pulled together for the 9th.
So then-
If we have it very close together and then there's just a few edits, that should, I don't think we'd need the whole committee to, you know, do it. So hopefully we'll just need the meeting on the 9th.
You decide then whether or not
We'll
to have another
decide,
meeting?
yeah, we're gonna decide then whether or not we need another meeting before the public hearing. And that's the meeting that will set the date for the public hearing, based on the availability of the SAU staff.
Do we want to set that date now? I mean, I don't know how with the posting. Does it make more sense to set another committee meeting the week of July 15th? And then potentially we cancel it if we don't need it? I don't know how it works with
Let's see the way-
communicating to the public about our meetings.
Why wouldn't we do it the week of July 23rd?
Because that's when the notice of the public hearing will go out.
If we're having the public hearing in August, the week of the 12th, we need to have it out 2 weeks prior. So we're looking at a meeting the week of the 15th of July.
Yeah.
Dates?
I can't do the 15th. That's the Monday.
That would still give us 2 weeks to post the public hearing if we met the week of the 22nd.
Yeah,
We could we could meet early the week of the 22nd and then
posted
post
by-
it late in the week.
If we
Yeah.
post on August 29th, then the meeting could happen as early as August 12th.
yeah.
I'm sorry, if we post on July 29th, the meeting could happen on August 12th,
Okay, so we'll
So-
probably plan for another meeting then the
the week of the
week of the
22nd.
22nd.
Okay.
Do we want to set a tentative date, any date? Everybody got their calendar out?
I'm working on it.
So Wednesdays are good, or?
Should we say,
Well,
Wednesday's not good for John. What about the 23rd?
I can do that Wednesday, it's just,
I know, but I know you already have something.
23rd.
23rd?
Third's all right.
Let's tentatively set the 23rd then as the next.
Okay.
Do you want to post it now, or do you want to wait until the
No,
9th to
no,
make a
let's
determination?
wait, because
Okay.
we're gonna wait, we'll wait and see, thank you.
Okay.
To see if we really need it, but it's better to have people have it in their calendars now.
Yes.
And I don't think the superintendent's available July 9th either. Do we need Mr. Dowd back on the 9th? Well, you guys can,
Yes, because we're waiting on some information from him
oh,
about
right,
the infinite vision, that whole piece of it, and
well, he may be able to just
Plug
send
that
that
in.
to us too.
And if the audit ever comes in,
Well, the problem with the audit is the SAU needs to approve the audit before it goes out to the public. So unless it's in for the meeting on Monday, I don't think there's gonna be, we're not gonna see this audit.
okay.
So, okay, well, thank you. Appreciate
do
it.
we
Any
have
other?
a motion to
We
adjourn?
need a
then?
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Motion?
Let's get out of here.
Just adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Adjourned at 9.